Yes, I move to approve tonight's agenda with the removal of item 8.8, the resolution accepting temporary construction staging easement.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Okay. And the agenda is passed as amended, 6-0. Thank you. All right, we'll turn it over to Sergeant Christ for a sheriff report.
All right. Good evening, everybody. First thing on my list of stuff to talk about real quick is our National Night Out went really well. Our numbers were up. We ran out of food quickly. So we hot-footed over to the grocery store and got some more burgers, and so we were about 50 shy, but that's about 400 people that we served and had a good time. Unfortunately, our helicopter had to cancel for business purposes, so that was not good for somebody, but it went very well. So it was a well-attended event. Probably the bigger news, Folk Fest was in town this weekend, and it, from our vantage point, it did go very well. We did have a couple small backups, but I got 0 complaints from traffic or anybody in town. In fact, I did talk to a lady, a local resident, who called me on Friday at the start of the festival. She just wanted to talk about the rocky grass because she thought that there was some issues with pedestrian crossings and the timing of cars and so on, maybe causing some backups. And after kind of explaining to her some things, and she came into the understanding that there's other factors that are involved in this. You know, pedestrians will cross wherever they want and cause backups. So it's not just the person at the fork trying to get pedestrians across safely. So, but I did follow back up with her later on this afternoon after everything was done, and she thought that it was a lot better through the Folk Fest. So I thought that was pretty complimentary. Bluegrass staff has, in my opinion, just done an outstanding job with the underpass crossing, directing people off of the farm away from 36. I would push that number all the way up to 90% of all the pedestrians went through across the bridge and through the underpass. There was like nobody on North Foothills or North 36. So that is a really big, significant change, and they pushed it really hard. They put extra staffing in there, and my officer up at the farm was they were bored all weekend long. There just was nothing to do. So kudos to that. The other new change that we incorporated for the festivals was an additional spot of security on the cliffs. So back in the day when I started doing this, like 18 years ago, we had a spot on the cliffs where the concern was trespassing and safety. That's still the concern today, of trespassing and safety, especially at night. You take one wrong step and it's going to be a big problem for somebody. But for the past couple years, myself and JJ have been really meeting with Craig and his staff a few times and pushing the not only the safety of all that and trespassing, but really the safety for the festival goers. And in this world with, you know, the Vegas style stuff, that cliff is like, it's an easy target. So we just kind of designated that as kind of just a weak link in the armor of security. I mean, we can't prevent everything, but Craig and his staff said, yeah, you know, safety's number one. We're not going to skimp on this. So we had an officer up there on the cliffs behind the houses, making sure in the popular areas where most people, you know, where we get the reports of most people coming up, just posting it as a security spot. So we had many festival goers compliment on that and say, yeah, we've always wondered about that. I talked to the residents up there, and they were very happy because it also decreased the amount of foot traffic through their property. So that was a big improvement for the Folk Fest.
Where exactly were you up there?
Where exactly were we?
Yeah, where was your security spot?
Well, it's right between the 1001 block, the 10,001 house, and 10,027. That's the segment that we're looking at. So the driveway at 1027 goes all the way up to the very top to the west. So that's where we parked. But there's a corridor of trails up there that have been beaten down by locals for many years. So when you're in Bluegrass, there's rocks that jut right out that are just plain as day, and so that was our main post. That's where we stationed officers. We marked off a flagged area to the north, maybe by about 50 or 75 feet, just with some yellow tape, just to kind of give people an idea of this area you shouldn't be in. That went down to the 10,001 block. Carol and Larry Cole's residence is where kind of on the south edge. So it was in that area. If you're in Bluegrass and you look up, it's kind of where the cliff goes like this, and then it goes back up to the south. It's right there on the northern edge of that.
No, I think that's great. Last couple of years ago when I was there, someone broke their leg up there late at night, and it was really hard to get them out. And so I think just keeping people out of there is really smart. So I'm really glad to hear that.
Exactly. The other thing that we kind of dubbed that position is it's an overwatch. You know, it's kind of a SWAT sniper term. You know, you have sniper and overwatch guy. But when you're standing out there with a simple pair of binoculars, and even the naked eye, you can see almost the entire venue. You know where the stage is. So that person had an event radio and was in contact directly with event staff, and then obviously their police radio in contact directly with me. So if there was an incident going on the grounds, I mean, that's a bird's eye view. They can direct personnel to the area that something's going on very quickly, because it can be real chaotic on the ground. So that was, I think, a really big improvement, and we'll continue to work those positions throughout. Traffic was, good throughout town. We had no calls for service, no medical calls that required, Lions Fire to come into the grounds. So it was a pretty successful weekend.
Trustee Browning.
Yeah, I'm curious, just as a matter of public education and self-education. I mean, the locals have known about where you can go on the cliffs for years to listen to the music.
Right.
Are there areas up there that are not, where you wouldn't be trespassing, that are public access areas?
They're not public access because the way I kind of understand it from the maps and looking at the property boundary pins that are located up there that are kind of hard to find. We did put some flagging tape on one resident who wasn't very happy by like 6 feet, so we just moved it over, and then he was fine with it. But according to Craig and the GSA map that we were looking at, basically from the cliff face up like maybe 20, 25 feet is really all Bluegrass property. That's like that easement area. So most of the residents that border Upper Fifth like that, their property will stop before you ever get close enough to the cliffs. So as far as a public area, no, but it's their property. They've been there forever. And it's a safety issue is really what we're trying to deal with.
So if somebody asks, is there a place I can go up there in the cliffs watch me, the correct answer is no. Any place you're going to be is going to be trespassing.
It's trespassing, yeah.
Okay, that's good to know, because word has been out for years among the locals. So. Okay, good to know. Thank you.
All right.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, we'll go over for staff reports. Hello?
Hi.
Hi, Jim. Nice to have you back. Did the attorney have a question?
No.
Oh,
Disappointed.
oh, you're playing behind me.
Coming on.
All right.
So I can start talking without looking if you want me to.
Go for it.
You want to know where Jill is? She's in a training class in Utah. So,
What's it saying? Search. No signal.
so the first slide has to do with the unaudited revenues for July. We had $644,879.
There we go.
About 44% of that was for the general fund. The electric fund had about 19% of that revenue. And you're not supposed to see that.
Go to, Kim, could you do it to a presentation mode?
But if you look at it, you'll see all the enterprise funds.
It's a PDF. Is there a presentation?
There you go. I still got my footnote over there. This is my speaking points.
Well, then you can read that.
Yeah. So all the enterprise funds, that's your utilities, make up 44% 46% of the revenue, and then you got 10% with the parks. So the expenditures for July, 43% general fund, water fund was 30%. You add all the enterprise funds, utilities together, that's 46% of the expenditures, 11% for the parks. Now, the reason the water fund is high is because they had a payment of a loan fund. Interest, that's about $150,000 of that $190,000. So you kick that out, and it's a lot better expenditures. Here's a comparison of the revenue and expenditures for July. As you can see, the general fund, electric fund, sanitation fund, stormwater fund are in positive, more revenue than expense. Again, the water fund has got that $150-something thousand in there of a loan payment. And on the Parks and Recreation Fund, I think, didn't dig into it deeply, but I think it's just the timing of our revenue. We didn't have a whole lot of revenue that's being reflected there, but after all the events we've had recently, we should start to see the revenue exceed the expenditures. The year-to-date revenues and expenditures, general fund, electric fund's good. Water fund is influenced, so is the sanitation fund, by all the revenue, all the bond payments and loan payments that we make. Stormwater is okay. And again, Parks and Rec, we're waiting for some more revenue to start showing up, which it should occur. Now we compare our revenue to budget. As you can see, we're exceeding our budget in general fund, electric fund, not quite there in water fund, sanitation fund. We're good pretty much in the stormwater, and then the parks is down. But we have budgeted that we're going to have losses in the parks, the sanitation, and water fund. We think we will.
Trustee Farrell.
You can advise if we should wait for my question at the end, but I am kind of curious as to, I don't remember us necessarily budgeting at this point that we were going to be below budget, that we were anticipating that we were going to be below.
Right. What it was that I anticipated the summit process coming in, and we would have income from that. But when the Board of Trustees made the approval of the budget that went to the state, we did not have that in there. So we brought the budget back to what the Board of Trustees approved. We're going to have an amendment to the budget where we'll bring in the summit stuff at that time, and then things should right itself. It'll be back to what you saw when we were talking about it. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Since you had a question, I'm a little curious about parks. Are we just behind where we thought we'd be? I mean, I would think by August we would have seen the bulk of our revenue. So, I mean, things will start to slow down, I think, from here.
I think we have a timing issue on the revenue coming in. I think if we just give it another month or so, we'll start to see things come in that will, like there's no revenue yet coming from the two, bluegrass events.
Okay.
We haven't seen anything like that.
Okay. Sorry. Trustee Brown.
Sorry.
If now it's time for questions. And it was on the electric fund, and you had the figure on there a minute ago. Let me get it back up here. The electric fund for July, the total electric revenues for June were $195,000. It shows total electric revenues for July at $120,000. You would expect July to be a very high electric revenue month, air conditioning and so forth. Is maybe that not a complete figure yet for July?
What number are you looking at?
On the July electric revenue. It was like on page 3 of the monthly roll-up report that we got in our packet. It looked like it had dropped $75,000 from June, and you would expect it to go up. Not the total, it's really the monthly. Why would there be a big drop from June to July? Maybe July, there's still some money to come in, receivables or something?
Well, I'm not following you, to be honest.
Okay. It's in the monthly roll-up report, and it shows,
He's not on this graph, he's
Yeah.
on the actual roll.
I'm on the actual roll-up figures, although you had the
The thick
the
packet.
prior slide, you had a figure of 120,219 for electric revenues for July. And my question is, the June revenues were 195. So why would there be a $75,000 drop between June and July in electric when everybody's using their air conditioners? I mean,
So I'm looking at the revenue and expenditures.
Yeah,
There's
that's-
120,219 for
Right.
electric fund.
So that same green bar with 122.19 for June would have been 195. So my question was, what's going on from June to July where you have a huge drop in electric revenue when you'd expect it to be the opposite? July's a hotter month than June.
I can't answer you at this
Anyway,
moment. I would have to come back to you.
And I thought, well, maybe not all the July revenues are in yet,
It could be
but
a timing issue with bills being paid.
it just seems strange.
Yeah, it does, unless there was some kind of, was there something purchased? I know we did.
It's
Were
it's revenues, it wasn't
expenses the
expenses.
same?
Let's see.
Those expenses look low, 52,000, 53,000.
No, but
Looks
for the
low.
month before.
Let's see, revenues. Total expense,
The only other thing I can think
Yeah, I
of is
don't
if
know.
we had permits issued or something, but that's still a lot of money.
so,
for that.
anyway, that's just,
Let's do a
that's just a
follow-up.
question as to why electric revenues would have had a big drop from June to July.
We will get an answer.
Okay, thanks.
Now, where were we? Very sensitive.
That is overall.
Trying to go back. Maybe I should go forward to the last one and we'll end the thing real quick. All right.
We're on slide 6.
I think we were there. Yeah, compared to your, all right.
That's where you are. Just shoot your arrows.
And we're comparing ourselves to the 19 and 18, 2018. As you can see, our expenditures are going up pretty much in just about every fund, except our water fund was higher in 2018 than we are right now. So we're spending more money. Now, Jill had some nice comments and all this, and I can't get them up on the screen to read to you, but, so you're having to listen to me kind of ad lib here.
Can you pull up your comments, Jim?
I can't, I don't know how to operate these things.
Got the cavalry coming.
Yeah,
If you come out of the screen,
oh, cool.
there's your
Yeah,
comments.
yeah, thanks.
Okay.
General fund has revenue exceeding expenses for all quarters. So our revenue is exceeding, all right? Electric fund has revenues exceeding for both the first and third quarters, and the second quarter,
Just my better explanation.
expenses were slightly higher but could be absorbed by the additional revenue received in the first quarter. The water department's expenses for the third quarter to date exceed the revenues received to date. Expenses are higher in those quarters, mostly from debt service. The fund was budgeted at a loss of $113,648. But when we do the change or adjustments to the budget, that we should bring that in line.
Trustee Caravas has a question.
The UEB in Victoria, as we discussed this, it's been going on for quite a few years, more than 4 or 5 years. The percentage is down, though, this still can't account for 35% of the water we are billed when we bill out to customers. I know you're aware, we talk about it in the UEB, so I'm just letting everybody else know. At one time, it was upwards of 60%. We found some leaks, fixed them. And that's why early on, when I pushed for meters in parks and everywhere else, hopefully that helps find it. There's probably some other places, as money comes available, we could probably add meters in our lines that would help us find if it truly is leaks, or is it our reporting data SCADA, right? And I know there's some updates coming that we're going to update things, so there's still maybe things not jiving. Been going on quite a while, so it's something we probably want to keep an eye on and continue to work for. I know the UEB, the current chair and the past chair have worked pretty hard and diligently on it, but right now they do show that there's a 35% difference with what we're billed from Longmont and what we bill out to customers. So whether it's just SCADA data and it's SCADA data, or it's something we're really missing, we just need to continue trying to find out where it is and determine and fix.
Okay. The unaudited revenues and expenditures by quarter for the sanitation fund. The first quarter and the second quarter have expenses exceeding the revenue, which was expected for this department. And for the first time this year, the monthly revenues exceeded. First time in the third quarter is when the revenues exceeded the expenditures. And the department was budgeted for a loss of $612,089. Stormwater fund, as you can see, we're doing pretty good. Revenues are slightly lower than expenditures for all quarters. I'm sorry, I moved too quick. I'm back to stormwater. All right, now we're going to go to parks. Revenues are slightly lower than expenditures for all quarters, including the third quarter to date. The fund was budgeted at a loss of $62,955.
I was going to say, we really didn't budget for losses.
That's the way she's wording that.
Yeah.
We can't budget for a
No.
lot, so it's including the capital expenditures, I think, is what she's referring to here, Jim. Did she tell you?
She didn't tell me that, but I would say, just from my perspective, there are some home addition fees that would be coming in that would happen when Summit comes on board. And that wasn't part of the approved budget, so we took them out of the budget as you know it from the past. Am I making sense?
No, I don't recall that we did that we took those out of the budget. They were in the budget.
You didn't. In the budget we presented to you that you talked about, they were in there, but when we actually reported it to the state, we reported something that was not including Summit.
Then
So
what we
we're bringing-
approved didn't get reported to the state.
We don't know. I better not speak to all this because I'm.
It would be good to get clarification on that, I
Yes,
think,
Jill
because
would.
I mean, I can't recall ever creating a budget that didn't balance
That's what I'm saying.
in our history of budgeting for the
Well,
town that I'm aware of. So
What we did is we used funds, not revenue, but we used funds to make up the loss.
The loss, though.
When-
It shouldn't have been lost.
I know what you're saying, and I think it does depend a little bit on how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we did budget for those housing starts and the fees associated with those housing starts in those funds. Whether those have to be put into the reserve or whether those can be used in operations is a topic we negotiate every budget cycle. My understanding was that we had them in the operating budget for parks and also for the enterprise funds. And so the budget that we approved, in my recollection, had those in there.
So
So-
what I think I hear Jim saying is our new finance director is wanting to report it differently than we did previously, is what I'm hearing, but we didn't get that opportunity to talk about this before she left. That what Jim is saying is what was discussed in budgeting didn't end up in the final budget submitted to the state. So all of these funds that they are saying was budgeted in the red are missing the summit contribution to the funds. But I do think I will definitely put it on our list for our next meeting, not to wait for a full month and have Director Johnson come and give an update on how that is reported differently. But it appears to me that as a CPA, she's reporting it differently than as what we did as an operating budget.
Yeah,
So
I'm looking at
we
our
need to-
resolution, and our revenues exceed expenditures in all those
In all
categories.
funds, it did.
So certainly, I understand there's maybe accounting practice
accounting
sometimes
issue, I
that
think.
changes how you look at things from the accounting
Yes.
perspective.
But I'll.
But
have her-
I just want to, I don't want to leave the public with
No,
the
not
impression
at
that we
all.
budgeted
No.
losses in all of these categories, because I don't
not
think
at all.
that's really technically the case.
I will
but-
have her follow up with you before then and then do a public update next time as well as flood recovery.
Okay, thanks.
Sales tax for June, we received, well, it should have been sales tax for May, which we received in July, were higher than June and May of 2019. Well, this doesn't make sense to me, but anyway, our sales tax is always a 2-month thing. But as you can look at the diagram, you can see that our sales taxes are increasing. And a lot of this, we're starting to report out of state sales tax for the town. We're starting to see that. I think that Director Johnson gave you some comments or information regarding sales tax and showing you what it's going to do. Here's a little chart on the occupancy and lodging tax, or lodging fee, I'm sorry. It's mostly coming from vacation rentals by owners. The budget has been adjusted for seasonality to be more of a bell curve with the height of the bell during the summer months. The receipts from the fee is in July doubled, but are still not generating the revenue expected. We were expecting
Wouldn't we expect there to be a bump once the festival camping comes in?
I would think
Do
so.
we- okay. So that would show up probably in the next
In August.
report.
Yes, August or September. I'll say that because I'm not sure on the timing of what we get from the people running the festivals. No, that's a wrong statement. That is a wrong statement. They have nothing to do with the lodging fee.
The camping
The
it does.
camping does,
does, yeah.
yeah.
It all falls under the same title.
And sanitation service charges. Service charges for the sanitation fund have increased 37% over 2018. Year-to-date sanitation service charges. Rate increases account for $80,147 year-to-date. Additionally, starting with the April billing in 2019, the BOD surcharge started, which has generated an additional $26,113 of revenue, averaging $6,528 per month. Commercial customers are paying 93% of the BOD revenue. Thank you. Questions? Any more questions?
Did you have another question?
Was actually more of a comment, if I could, related to setting up, and I think the finance director is looking at establishing a monthly budgeting process going into 2020.
Correct.
Well, and I would suggest that, and I suspect she's thinking of this anyway, of setting up a fairly rigorous set of algorithms for variance analysis, so that you have a specific percentage and/or dollar amount per line item, which would trigger the need for an explanation. And the explanations are specific as to seasonality, changes in volume, changes in unit cost, and so forth, so that you set up a framework so that each variance beyond a certain level by line item has to be reported, not by the finance department, but by the department for
Department
which
head.
the expense is, who's responsible for the given expense. If it's beyond a certain level, then they must have a corrective action plan for how they're going to bring it back to conformance with the budget.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I just wanted to make that comment, and I'd be happy to talk with Joe about the.
I will relay that comment on to Joe. I will tell you that we are planning, have tested it, that we're going to put in monthly budgets.
Very good.
It does work. We know how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will have some significant follow-up on that in writing before your next meeting, and then in public at our next meeting, okay? So, thank you. In regard to some of administrative highlights that occurred the last couple of weeks, I do want to let the board know that we were not able to reach any agreement with Mr. Freisig in the past couple of weeks, so we are moving forward with our summons and our notice to vacate the property. FEMA had 3 staff in town last week, 2 from Washington DC. Oh, I'm sorry.
A question related to Frizik, and that, the access, are we pursuing that alternative access?
We have pursued the alternative access, and it appears that it will be coming to fruition.
It'll be available to us? Excellent.
So FEMA, 2 people from FEMA headquarters and 1 from Region 8 were here last week to start their case study of lions, to put into the official FEMA natural disasters library. They did, after interviewing different people in town and touring the area, decided they're going to do 3 separate case studies, one on our housing situation during and following the flood, one on our mitigation strategies we've implemented to prevent the amount of damage in the next disaster, and thirdly, to highlight our recovery planning process. They were extremely amazed, actually, of the amount of recovery planning we were able to do in those 6 weeks to put together a recovery action plan, and that we actually have used it and followed it over the years. So those are the 3 areas they're going to be doing separate case studies on. So just wanted to let you know that. We did have, some of the staff also had a meeting with Nextlight recently, which is the what's the correct term? Fiber optics network that Longmont operates, but it's called Nextlight. We were inquiring because our new public works facility is actually in their electric territory, served by Longmont Power. So we inquired if, as a customer of Longmont Power, we can get Nextlight. They sent a representative out to meet with us, and he since has followed up. They are going to provide a quote to us to provide potential of providing fiber to all of our municipal facilities. They have reviewed how much data and space we use, and especially during the recovery and all the maps and GIS documentation. And they're going to be giving us a quote on that. We'll be able to select which areas we might want to have fiber directly laid to. We did discuss the potential of letting others along that route also potentially connect into the fiber. At this time, they're saying that they need to take care of all of their Longmont residences before they expand that further. But in good intergovernmental cooperation, they're willing to provide it to our municipal facilities. So that is the answer right now.
If they would provide it to municipal
Can you use
facilities,
your-
including-
Sorry.
I'm sorry,
I just need to say-
including town hall and I guess the annex, any possibility that they would also provide it to the library where there would be public access to fiber optic use? That would be a
We brought that
huge
up to them, and now that they're
benefit.
their own special district, that would have to be negotiated with them.
Right, but-
They, because we inquired about that, of course, and we inquired about the fire station as well. And they said that would have to be separate agreement with their boards.
Oh, I'm
But-
sure it would, but if they're bringing fiber optic cable, not even across the street, to the same side of the street, past the library.
I know.
And you got public access to like 20 new computers at the library, that would be a huge addition to the
I
community.
understand. We
Okay.
advocated for that. It's just at this point, their only leverage that they have, the Next Light department, is to municipal facilities. So
Okay.
that will have to be a decision made on their end. They said they are just getting so many requests from all the surrounding communities in the area that they had to prioritize. So right now, that's what they're looking at, and we'll see what the proposal comes in at. We'll see if it's even feasible for us. Also, just some updates we want to make sure that the public is aware of is we will start crosswalk striping and painting next Monday and Tuesday. So there will be some activity going on in areas of town to assist with that.
Sorry, if you guys could try to, we can hear you. Thank you.
Also, we are planning to install another rapid flashing beacon for pedestrian crossings at US 36 and Park Street down by the Black Bear Hole and across from those businesses. That is slated to be scheduled for the first part of September. So we hope to get that done yet this year. Also, we have gotten the camera installed and operating at the recycling center. So fair warning to everyone, if you are dumping materials that are not meant to be in the recycling, you will be contacted by law enforcement and charged. The summer concert series is now ended, and with great success. The last concert was a highlight, actually. The Lions Community Foundation is still looking at other ways to partner with the town and would like to come to the board on your September 16th meeting to give you an update of their activities and what we can do to be working together further. And then lastly, we discussed at our last meeting the potential of submitting for another grant for tourism. We did get that submitted for $10,000 of tourism promotions and marketing. And we have heard from Safe Routes to Schools that they have our contract drawn up for the 4th Avenue Ped Bridge. So staff will be putting that together, and that will come before you on September 3rd as well.
It's exciting.
So, exciting. Oops, excuse me.
Trustee Farrell?
I just wanted to take a moment, Victoria and I discussed that I could do this at this point. So I'd like to just announce that CMEX donated $5,000 to the town of Lyons for the skate park. And so we had a nice little get-together and discussed with Dave Cosgrove that we will probably, at some point, fall or perhaps spring, kind of do an official opening of the skate park, and we will invite CMEX to that ceremony. And then they also had a further discussion, which I thought was just an interesting, that they were offering perhaps an in-kind donation of large flagstone that could be used in different areas, perhaps. And so I think that the two of them, Dave and Michael Clausen, are going to be working together and looking into that for those uses. So,
Great. Thanks.
There is another item that's been taking quite a bit of attention, and that's the pond area and the algae growth and the weeds that have decided to take over our new pristine parks. There is, we just want to reassure everyone that we're working with the ecologists and some aquatic specialists to come up with solutions. And right now, there are 3 different options on the table. So the Ecology Board and the Parks and Rec Board are going to be reviewing them with staff and with the contractor to try to come up with the best solution with the least environmental impact. But it is a very complex ecology in that area, and the heavy rains literally just washed pounds and pounds of the newly spread seed into those ponds. The heat has been intense and rain. So they are trying to establish those, and just want to make sure people know that, yes, we're aware the ponds are full of algae and we are working on solutions. So the Ecology Board and Parks Commissions will be the lead citizen-driven groups to work on that.
Trustee Farrell?
I just had a request that perhaps we can consider putting out some kind of notice that it's not safe to let your dogs, obviously nobody's supposed to be around them right now anyway, but that it's not safe to let animals, dogs, to swim in the ponds with that kind of algae. It can make them very ill.
Well, it is not the blue-green algae.
No? Okay.
No, no.
Okay.
It has been tested, and it's not that. It doesn't mean it can't develop, but you're absolutely right. We have been trying to tell people for months not to let your dogs in that area, and now people are concerned. So we can certainly, it's posted right now, no, you're not to be in that area, but if the board would like to, we could do some special no dogs off leash as well to reiterate that. But at this point, no one is supposed to be in there anyway, and it is not blue-green.
Okay.
Yet.
Anything else? So I just, thank you for the report. I wanted to also just see if staff, I know you're talking about this, but with the loss of our weekly newspaper, I am a little bit concerned about the public being able to stay current in terms of what public hearings and issues the board is working on. And I know it's all on the website, but I think people do really read the e-blasts. And so I thought, as a suggestion, and I'm glad I saw Ariel was here for a little bit, she stuck out, is could we, as part of the e-blasts every week, include what topics are on the agenda for a public hearing, at least? And maybe just include a notice that here's where you can find the Board of Trustees agenda when it's on the website, when it's posted. I think that would help, so that people are reminded that there are ways to kind of access. And I sent a link on my mayor Facebook page just about the live streaming, just reminding people they can listen in for themselves as to what we're talking about. But I do feel like it's going to take people a little while to get used to figuring out where else to go for that information. I'm glad we still have a newspaper in town, but on a monthly basis, it just may not end up being timely enough for some people to feel like they can send feedback to the board.
Yes, we are very much aware that we are going to have to change our practices. The town clerk looked up the resolution that was passed about our newspaper of record, and it does include that if ours was to go away, the Lions Recorder, that we could use Longmont or Boulder or Denver Post as our official publication. We know that's probably not the most locally friendly option to get to the most people. So we will continue to post on our bulletin board here at Town Hall. We will post on our website. And then I don't know if Attorney Godick is prepared to talk about it, but there's a new legislation that was passed about publishing online as an official source.
And we were talking about this on the break, and I need to follow up, but I think that there was legislation, but it may not have been enacted. So I think there was a bill, but I'm not sure it got through. So I need to check. I've made myself a note that we'll check on that and get back to you.
Yeah.
Because I think that there is still required to be a publication of public notices in a newspaper, but that may be changing.
Okay, and I apologize, I should have introduced you at the beginning of the meeting. This is Attorney Paul Godak, who's filling in for Brandon Dittman tonight.
Thank you.
So if you haven't
But
had
in
a
the
chance to say.
meantime, we will certainly publish public hearing notices. We can put those on the weekly e-blast as well as those other areas. We will just increase exposure as much as we can in the meantime.
That was going to be my question, was the public notices that we put out for whatever, and legal notices and how, because I did read Paul, thanks, about that legislation. I was wondering how that came along. I never followed up on the outcome, but yeah, it'd be nice to have our public notice, legal notices just put out there weekly, like everyone's used to, in our e-blast. Hopefully that suffices as we stick in the Longmont paper, and hopefully the legislation can move forward to allow towns, as the predictions nationwide for small town newspapers will be going away in rapid numbers, that it will help keep the public informed.
Okay,
The only thing is that with having to do, if this doesn't work out with the new legislation that came forward to be able to do it in the website, the timing with Longmont and Denver is going to, it's going to cause us a little bit of issues with some ordinances to begin with until we get that kind of down pat of how to do that. But I really think that this is going to, we'll be able to do this quite quickly with the stuff, the new legislation. So hopefully we won't get behind there.
okay, thank you. There was a Boulder County special events schedule also listed. And you were going to mention the item that you brought up in the workshop about the issue Paul had raised.
We just want to make the board and the public aware that we do have a very small piece of right-of-way that the town owns that we were planning to sell along with the decommissioned water plants on the eastern corridor. And our policy is usually to get an appraisal for those types of situations. However, this piece is so small that the appraisal will actually cost more than the property is probably worth. And so we are going to be using reasonable and best judgment from previous sales in the area to come up with a price on that piece, which when and if the sale goes through to Think Generator Development, the board would have an opportunity in the public to weigh in on that. Just want to make you aware of that.
Okay, thank you. Was that just for information, or do you have a report on it, or? Okay, you don't have to. I just didn't know if you had something else you wanted to say about it. Okay. All right, next is the audience business, so this is the portion.
What about the,
Well,
it did go up, but it went out to us, and I got a question.
I think it's just information.
Oh, shit, that's right, X means. All right.
That's all right.
I'll leave questions to the town. Thank you.
If you had a question about it, you may ask.
Well, it wasn't in the packet, so I don't know if we discuss it. It just came to us as information, what Jill, Ms. Johnson sent us.
The notice
The
about
notice.
banking and. Those are just information. Yeah.
Well, also about the trustees and employees, what brought that about? I mean, that code section's been around since the 70s. I'm kind of curious what started that, what brought that up, where did it come from whom?
How do you want me to address that? As a member of Mountain States Employers Council, there was literature that came across as a reminder to different communities, and we have always treated our Board of Trustees as independent contractors, and they are now saying that trustees and city councils are to be treated as employees. So we are
Who's that again?
the Mountain States Employers Council, which is a coalition of municipalities that use attorneys to guide them on human service issues.
Okay, that, like I said, that section of the code's been around, the IRS code's been around since before most of us were born. All of a sudden, to say everybody's in, okay, except maybe Barney. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. If it says we're employees, as elected officials, who's my boss? Is it the mayor? Is it you? Is it the other board members?
The community, the town
Public.
of.
How does that fall with workers' comp? So if I'm going down to check on something, Mark and I are walking down and listening to something people complain about, we trip, fall, break our legs, workers' comp, you can take care of it?
Yes.
Town's responsible?
Yes,
Insurance, 401k, I mean, that
You will be-
little amount that's in there that's gonna cost the town that's gonna cost the town, the liability of this town and lines and its people is a lot greater than what they're saying.
well, we had, our previous council had recommended or had approved the board to be independent contractors. The Mountain States Employers Council and our current council agree that you should be being treated as employees. So if we want to put this on a workshop so that, you know, we can have a representative there to explain this better, we certainly
There's
can.
exempt, non-exempt, salary,
Sure.
non-salary, there's all
Sure.
kinds of.
Sure. With the amount of hours that you are currently paid for, it's considered very, very minimal part-time, and so there won't be much eligibility for
You
any
know,
type of
that's- yeah,
benefits.
I think section A of that code indicates, you know, kind of gets down to the definition stuff and wages for certain purposes, and then it kind of knocks out what, the way I understand it, and I'm.
I agree.
don't think the tax attorney.
It was a
I
surprise
know
to me as well. In all my career, I've never had this situation either.
So I think in that memo, that caused.
Did they make a mistake? It almost sounds
I mean,
like it's
that's
an error.
kind, yeah, that's.
I mean, it's kinda silly, but-
That's $743 cost of the town.
Yeah. I
I'm
agree with
concerned
you
that's
on
gonna be
that.
much, much greater to
Kinda
the
ridiculous.
townspeople of Lyons and.
Well, why don't we add it as an agenda item or a workshop item and have one of those experts come and explain?
Trustee Browning?
One thing that happens in that area is there's constant court cases coming down on who's a, you know, contract employee, and maybe there was some court decision about, you know, elected officials. So it is worth looking into, but it doesn't necessarily,
I just
the
asked
law
the-
may have changed, you know.
The town administrator to forward me what Mountain States is doing, because I haven't heard of this, and I do a lot of employment work.
Yeah, I used to
It
also.
Something sounds right.
It just sounds like a disconnect there, so
Yeah.
so I'd like to, probably just more for my edification than for advice, but yeah.
Yeah, it seems like there could be some avenue for local decision-making on that. Okay. Okay. All right, we'll move on to audience business. This is the portion of the meeting where the audience is welcome to address the board on items that are not on tonight's agenda as a public hearing. We don't have any public hearings on the agenda tonight, so every topic is open for public comment. When you come forward, please give your name and address for the record, and each person will have 4 minutes. And just a reminder, the board does not respond to audience business. This is simply for us to listen to the public. Did you have a sign-up sheet?
I did, but I don't think anybody.
If you didn't sign up, that's okay. Just raise your hand and come on up when you're ready. Come on up.
Hello? Hello. Okay, my name's Diane Johnson. Most of you know me as Dee. I own the building at 436 High Street, right next to the Stone Cup. Oh, my 436 High? Yeah, sorry. I was told I could turn it into an inn, a hotel motel. So I started doing it and finished a month ago. And now I'm told that it does not qualify. So I'm here to petition you, ask you to make an exception and give me a business license for a hotel motel. And my reasoning is because I do have it for sale. It has 5,000 square feet in the backyard that could be turned into more units. I personally don't have the ability to do that, but I'm hoping that maybe a new owner could do that. And I think if I go short-term rental or any other thing that you guys have recently come up with, it would hinder the new owner. And I would just like to get everything in place so when someone comes in to buy it, they don't have to go through this. So it's, like I said, it's ready. I don't know what else I can say except that's what I'm going for. The reason why I have been turned down at this point is because I don't have a lobby and I don't have a person working in the lobby, which I think in today's times, that's kind of silly because everybody does things by internet. And in fact, I've thought about putting a kiosk, which I brought you all information on how a kiosk could work, and have a self-check-in. So the whole place is for rent. It's not pieced out. It's like you rent the entire house or that's it. It's not like a strange family in the back room not knowing the other one. They have to take the whole thing. So I find it kind of silly to have a payroll person sit there and wait when the whole thing is rented. So, and as far as the lobby, I could maybe add a kiosk on the front porch. But at this time, just renting the whole thing, I don't even feel that's necessary. But maybe in the future, when there's more units, it might become necessary. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Do I turn in this paper? Okay.
Anna?
Hey everybody, I'm Tad Smith. Address is 59 South Taft Hill Road in Fort Collins. So I live in Fort Collins. This isn't my first time in this room. I came down several times in December and January to observe the discussion and process around the tiny house ordinance. And I want to thank you guys for spending so much time creating a really great framework for living legally in a tiny house in Lyons. What I wanted to bring up today was the first order of business under the general business, which is a small change that I'm proposing to the ordinance. As soon as the ordinance was passed, I live in a tiny house in Fort Collins. I came down a number of times to Lyons to try to find a place to put it. I spent a lot of time on the Lyons online GIS portal. And ultimately, my conclusion was that there are an extremely limited number of suitable locations for a tiny house that would actually comply with the current requirements of the ordinance. The ordinance allows for tiny houses as ADUs on R1 zoned and ag lots only. And as you're aware, there are a very limited number of R1 lots within the town of Lyons that are not within the floodplain. The ordinance does allow for tiny houses within the floodplain, but I spent some time talking with engineers about creating an anchoring system that would comply with the 120 mile per hour wind requirement for tiny houses under the ordinance. And their feedback was that there was no way to create and design that kind of anchoring system that would also comply with the ability to immediately remove the tiny house during a flood in the event of a flood warning under the town's FEMA mandated evacuation plan that would apply to any tiny house within the floodplain. So removing the R1 lots that are in the floodplain, as well as the ag lots, because to date, in all my research, I've yet to find any ag zone land that's not on the side of a hill or that's in the floodplain itself. I found less than, say, 20 by my count R1 lots in town that have sufficient level land to even be able to place a tiny house on that land. I've spoken with virtually all those property owners, and it doesn't sound like any of them are interested right now in hosting a tiny house on wheels on their property as an ADU. As you guys know, the original ordinance was crafted as an enhancement to the ADU policy that the town already had in place, and as such, tiny houses are only able to be recognized as ADUs. Because of that, the R2A lots in town, which are some of the best candidates possible for putting a tiny house on as a second unit, are excluded from the ordinance because R2A lots are not right now zoned to be able to have an ADU on the lot. Instead of an accessory unit, they're able to have a second unit, which from a construction perspective, from a housing stock functionality perspective, is essentially the same in a lot of ways as an accessory dwelling unit. And so what I'm proposing today is that either a tiny house be allowed on an R2A lot as a second dwelling unit instead of an accessory dwelling unit, subject to all the other technical requirements of the ordinance, or that an ADU be allowed on an R2A lot in the form only of a tiny house on wheels, recognizing that that's not a permanent installation necessarily. So either one of those, to me, it's a matter of reconciling, besides the technical planning, small technical planning discrepancies between the two that would need to be worked out in the drafting process. To me, it's largely a reconciliation of semantics within the building code or the zoning code for Lyons. And I view it as not at all a modification of the original intention or the spirit of the original ordinance at all. I would see this as, given the topography of Lyons and the specific issues related to putting a tiny house in Lyons, I would just view this as enhancing the ability to actually bring that kind of housing stock to Lyons as a technical fix, so to speak, for the ordinance. So I appreciate the time that you guys spent on the original ordinance. I appreciate the time tonight discussing as part of the general business, and thanks again.
Thank you. Anyone else for audience business?
Can if you want to.
If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Other than that, no. Okay.
Okay. All right, we'll close audience business. I do have a few appointments to make tonight to boards and commissions. If the board has no objections, I'd like to appoint Kars Postmiller to the Ecology Advisory Board, Don Kuntz to the Utilities and Engineering Board, and Cassidy Batts to the Student Advisory Commission.
Who's the UEB?
Don Kuntz. So welcome to those folks, to those new boards and commissions. I also just wanted to give the board a heads up that the student advisory commissioners, we may attend some of your meetings. So don't be surprised if you see a teenager pop in. We did have 2 attend the Parks and Rec Commission meeting, and they had interest in, there was a particular interest in sustainability and Ecology Advisory Board, in addition to Parks and Rec. So we're going to try to encourage them to at least go to a good variety of meetings and get a sense for how those boards are operating. So please just welcome them if you see them there. And they're a little shy and a little nervous, but it's great to have them showing up to these meetings. Trustee Garvis.
Since you're on, I forgot the Board of Commissions, I just received a email today that from the UEB that Dan Donhauser has stepped down from the UEB, so we'll need to find another person again.
All right.
So,
An opening on the UEB, if
So-
anybody's interested.
staff, you did such a good job finding someone else, please.
Publicizing them definitely does help.
So, yeah, but
so
thanks, yeah.
Keep that up.
Glad to have everybody aboard and new staffs.
Okay. If the clerk wants to read the items on consent into the record, please.
Resolution 2019-85, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving the First Amendment to the construction agreement with TCC Corporation for Public Works Operations Building Project 18 NKP WOB-07. Resolution 2019-86, a resolution of the Town of Lyons ratifying a construction agreement for the South St. Vrain Maintenance Project with Walsh Construction. Resolution 2019-87, a resolution of the Town of Lyons approving a second amendment with the construction agreement with American Demolition. First reading of Ordinance 1066, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, amending Chapter 16, Article 3 of the Lyons Municipal Code to add artesian manufacturing as permitted and conditional use in the commercial downtown zone district. Resolution 2019-88, a resolution appointing 3 new members to the Board of Trustees of the Lyons Regional Library District, the August 2019 accounts payable, and the August 5th, 2019 Board of Trustees meeting minutes.
Would anyone like to pull any items from consent? Trustee Browning?
I'd like to pull item 2 having to do with the construction agreement for the South St. Vrain Maintenance Project.
Any others? All right. Is there a motion to approve the remaining items on consent, please?
I'll move to approve the remaining items on consent.
I will second that.
I just had one quick question on the ordinance. Could we please plan a workshop to make sure we add that to the workshop agendas before it goes to public hearing, preferably? Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And the remaining items on consent were approved, 6-0. Thank you. First item on general business is actually on my list. It's the tiny home on wheels. I don't know if things were reordered at some point. Staff presentation.
Sorry, I had it on second on my agenda.
Not yet. No, I'm good. Thank you. Hi, so the request, we received a citizen request per the audience business you got an introduction to allow tiny homes in the R2A medium density residential district. The request is to allow a tiny home on wheels to be the second or a single family home on that site. It would not be considered an ADU, but a second home. Because on R2A, you don't have ADUs. Currently, throws are only allowed as ADUs. They are only allowed in agriculture and R1. And there are only 10 of them allowed under the current ordinance. When the ADUs and the throw ordinances were both adopted, PCDC and the Board of Trustees both considered throws in R2A, and it wasn't, they were not allowed. The ADUs are allowed in R1, E, EC, and all A districts. And throws are allowed, those are allowed, the tiny homes on wheels are allowed in R1 and A districts. So the question would be whether we, currently the second home, any home can be a primary residence in R2A. They can both be rentals, and the owner does not have to live there. In our ADU ordinance, if you have a primary home, you have to live in either the ADU or the primary home and rent out the other. So in this case, it would be, if we allow it in R2A, we would want to consider whether that requirement would stand or whether these would be potentially rentals. And so there are a lot of things to consider with how we move forward on allowing them in R2A. All of them would have to be analyzed and brought forward. But another question may be, would we allow these to become STRs? Because primary residence can be STRs. Right now, we don't allow STRs in R2A. We do allow STRs in R2. And a number of other zones. So I don't think there are any specific legal issues with regard to this or environmental conflicts, but we're just looking for your feedback, I think, at this point with regard to whether you think this is a good idea, we should analyze it further, how we should proceed with regard to this item.
Do you have an idea how many R2A
how many lots?
Lots do we have? Do you
I don't
have
know
any idea?
off the top of my head. There are not many.
And I wish I could recall our reasoning for not allowing these initially. Do you have any recollection as to what the reasoning was for not allowing it?
I think it was because these would be both rentals and they were not a primary resident on site. So the tiny homes were allowed as an ADU, and these would not be, R2A was not considered an ADU type unit. It was considered a rental unit. So whereas ADUs have to have a primary resident on site, these would not.
So we really contemplated this before we really brought up tiny homes as an ADU, basically.
We contemplated this before when we were just considering ADUs.
Right. So we were not thinking necessarily about tiny homes at that time.
Correct.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
No.
Trustee Browning?
Has the PCDC looked at this yet?
No, we were informed that we should bring it to the board first.
Oh, okay.
Request to be on your agenda, so you could send it out.
Okay, I mean, that, both the ADU ordinance when it was passed and the tiny homes spent an extensive time with the PCDC with all kinds of details being hashed out. And in fact, the PCDC has been here in the interim to fix a couple of things that were unanticipated. So the request tonight is really just for us to consider whether this is worth sending to the PCDC. Is that kind of what we're being asked to do?
My understanding, and maybe council can help, I think that the Board of Trustees can modify the ordinance without PCDC because it's a text modification. However, I would recommend sending it to PCDC for full consideration.
Yeah. And I had one more. So, as I understand from both the comments during audience business and yours, right now in R2A, you could do a second dwelling unit, a stick-built second dwelling unit, and you could rent it, but it would, of course, have to comply with the normal IRC requirements, right, which tiny homes don't.
Well, just point of clarification, you can build a small home. We did adopt the tiny home appendix, which is, for point of clarification, small homes in the tiny home appendix are not tiny homes on wheels. So it would have to be stick-built and inspected by our inspector on site, or a modular that was brought in and placed on a foundation. However, the tiny home on wheels is not allowed on R2A.
Okay. With respect to the legal question, I guess the other big question is we've waived tap fees and water share requirements for ADUs to encourage more ADUs to be built. And under the theory that they're small and that they don't really they're really using the same water taps. The water taps for the principal unit are enough to serve the small ADUs, and that was kind of the theory behind that. So, but as things exist now, if we did this, wouldn't the tiny homes have to have separate, if they're not ADUs, they'd have to pay a tap fee and provide a water share, correct?
If staff would suggest yes. If they were a separate primary residence and they were potentially rentals, yeah.
I mean, I'm not really asking.
But we would like to.
Should that be? I'm saying as the code exists right now, they would have to unless we change the code or the policies, right?
If they were allowed under the current R2A as a second dwelling unit, yes.
So
if they were allowed as an ADU in the ADU code, no.
So yeah, if you did it under the current R2A code, somebody told me yesterday, whether it's correct or not, that Colorado Big Thompson shares are now up to close to 60,000, and the tap fee, I think, for a 3/4 inch tap is $17,500, I think. So you'd be looking at a $77,000 upfront cost for a tiny home, which would be tough.
Plus sewer
to put it
and
mildly.
electric connection.
So, okay.
So that would be another,
true.
12,
Okay.
13,000.
Town administrator quickly, and then trustee Farrell.
I just wanted to clarify which lots we currently have that are R2A. It's actually along Fifth Avenue, Highway 7, actually from Broadway all the way down to Prospect. All of this whole stretch of houses from Railroad to Prospect are R2A, just the frontage. And then there is a large portion right off of Main Street, south of Railroad, down to Park Street. So it's in between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. It's quite a large area of single family, but R2A is defined as medium-high density residential.
Okay, trustee Farrell, and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Of our current code, we had limited the number of tiny homes to 10 initially. How many of those have been fulfilled at this point?
0.
Okay. And did we put a time frame on that? It was 10 for a certain period, like a sunset time?
I can't recall a sunset time. We may have. I
Something?
can't. It may have been 3 years that we should look at it again,
Yeah.
if I recall. But
And have you had any requests at this, for any of the 10?
we've had inquiries.
Inquiries?
But no applications.
No applications. Okay. Well, I don't know if other people have questions yet before I make an opinion, but I can wait.
It's actually more of a suggestion, and that's that I do think the PCDC should look at this. And two things. One is I believe we're having a workshop coming up related to fees for lodging fee / tax. And that during that, we should have a discussion also about STRs in general and if we need some modification of STRs. But in referring this question to the PCDC, I think that there should be special attention paid to the STR question on these kinds of lots, going back to the original thinking relative to why we wanted to have limits on STRs, because one could envision, for example, a corporation buying up lots and then having multiple units within a lot, all of which could be eligible for STRs. I think that discussion just has to occur, so that we're only doing what we want to do with this change. And I do think the PCDC should look at that very carefully.
Yeah, I concur with the Mayor Pro Tem. I'm interested in looking at this because I think, whenever you do something somewhat novel, I think you're going to run into finding out that you may need to tweak it. I would like to hear from the PCDC, but I would also say I'm looking more for just a letter versus a full-on kind of, we've been through this, so it's a familiar issue. It's not like we're starting from scratch. So I would expect they could have a discussion and send us their comment or recommendation or thoughts on that. I am not interested in allowing STRs in I really, really think these are residential areas. They need to stay residential. But I also think about this from a compatibility standpoint. That's mostly what I'm interested in. And is this compatible with the types of houses and homes that are already on these lots? It seems like it would be for a tiny home, especially if they can already have an accessory unit on the property. It doesn't seem like it would be incompatible as long as it were residential primarily. I mean, I just wrote an article for the Redstone about aging and lions. We're going to need so much additional housing for the next foreseeable future to house our aging parents and to house ourselves when we don't want to leave town, when our kids take over our 4,000 square feet homes, because we have way too much R1 in our town. So I'm fully in favor of at least having a look at it and seeing if this is something we should consider. Anyone else have? Trustee Browning?
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments as well. I was on the PCDC when we did the STR ordinances and ADU ordinances, and it took a lot of thought, and I don't want to see this come back to us a year or two from now. Like you say, there's been a lot of thought, but there were certain principles, as the Mayor Pro Tem had said. The purpose of the ADU ordinance and limiting the STRs is we wanted to maximize the potential availability of small rental units because we lost so many of them in the flood and have been unable to replace them. We were not trying really to encourage STRs as mini hotels. We recognized we didn't have a hotel in town, and there are some benefits from STRs of being able to accommodate out-of-town visitors, but we weren't trying to we were trying to avoid the result that a lot of Colorado towns have seen, which is potential long-term rental property being converted to STRs. We can't afford to lose any more potential long-term rental property here. So I just suggest that when the PCDC looks at this, they keep that in mind. I think those principles still apply. And we were hoping, because we had inquiries before the PCDC even took it up, of people that said, like you said, we're interested in doing it. I don't think we had any firm conclusions about how many actual lots in town a tiny house might fit on and under our regulations. We just knew that there were several people interested. We capped the number at 10, and we're going to see what happened with the first few that came in. But maybe from unanticipated reasons, the lots that are eligible, as the speaker said during audience business, those particular owners don't want to do them. So we haven't even been able to do what was a novel experiment. We haven't been able to see how it worked because apparently nothing fits. And so, you know, I think it's time to look at it again and tweak it if we need to.
Not sure who was first, Trustee Farrell and then Trustee Roberts.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. My first reaction is that, you know, we have 10 and we don't have a single application, and this code was approved last year, if I remember now. It's sort of blurry. And so my first reaction is I'm not excited about going through this process right now. However, if it's really becomes, because it's a compatibility issue, that it's really where the area that we had initially approved for our pilot 10, and that doesn't seem to be working, then perhaps allowing for another area is okay. So I guess a discussion is fine, but I have really strong reservations for it at this time.
As it stands, isn't it possible for a property owner of a R2A lot to apply to rezone to R1 and then be eligible for an ADU and a tiny home on wheel without the option of making that ADU a short-term rental?
No, yes, that's possible. They can apply to rezone. They would go through the PCDC and the Board of Trustees, and then they would be able to. However, the land use code, the land use plan from the comprehensive plan indicates this is a medium density area, so
right.
It would be difficult for that to occur. It's not impossible, but it's usually on the edges. So it would be a hard lift, if you will.
Gotcha. Yeah, we have this sort of curious situation where, by way of waiving the utility connection fees for ADUs in the R1 zones, we've incentivized higher density in the low density zones, and conversely de-incentivized higher density in the medium density zones. And we have situations where there are single family homes on R2 lots or R2A lots that there's really no option for building a second home, right? That would then seem to preclude what you've described as, well, I mean, it's an issue of compatibility with that zone as per the future land use map.
I may have not understood the question.
Okay. Well, but there's a variety of uses in the R2A zones, including situations where there's single-family homes that.
Correct.
That there's probably not options for, say, splitting the property or for building a second house on that property that's compatible with a medium density.
I imagine that to be true, but I would have to go and look at all those properties to be able to tell you. Some of those houses are, they're set back from the road, and then they have other things behind them. So building a second home on them may be difficult, but with our tiny home appendix, you could build a pretty small home in a particular location and have your second home.
That's stick built, and it would be otherwise compliant with the intent for the R2 or R2A zone.
Correct.
Thank you.
Trustee Karas?
Going through my notes, I think what Trustee Farrell was getting at and what we talked about last time, I was in line with her about, we did put past what we did, wanted to wait a while, and I'm in favor of tapping the brakes on some of our changes, constantly making changes to things we just passed, to see how things go, how they work out. But moving forward, having PCDC look at it, bring us something, I don't have a problem with that. Let's take a look at it. You know, some of the changes we just recently made were to short-term rentals in the downtown area. Today we just passed a thing on first round in consent to, in that same area, that we're going to allow people to have short-term rentals or investments to have a short-term rental, now artesian. Manufacturing, like artisan beer. Awesome. There we go. Artisan manufacturing. That does open up the possibility of complaints neighborhoods. What we're hearing recently with just new people moved into neighborhoods in 2018 with next to commercial zones. We're doing a lot. We're opening up the possibility for a lot more conflict. So, like Trustee Farrell, I think was getting at, was tapping the brakes, maybe slowing down a bit. I am in favor of that at this point. Looking to see how this stuff comes through. But like I said, send it to the PCDC. Let's see what they come up with. And like we said, not a full-blown hearings and everything. I think we just met with them in March or April, and their plate's pretty much full for 2019 because we asked them of some things. They said no. So I think they're pretty full for the rest of 2019, early 2020. It sounds like with our comprehensive plan starting to get rolling too. So I don't want to load them down either. So that's just where I'm at. So I'm okay with moving forward. But like I said, I have my reservations, but I don't have a problem having it looked at, weigh everything out, list everything where we've got, and I think to what Trustee Browning said, no one's applied or looked at building anything in the ADUs in the in R2A, because we did pass it as construction costs have been skyrocketing right in the middle of when we passed it, right when that's been happening here in the Front Range. Maybe that's a drawback with financing with banks, I don't know. But it's, I think it's worth a look forward to see if it's something we want to do further.
So I think I hear enough consensus to at least get a PCDC assessment. And would the board be okay with just saying, and I agree with you, I don't want to derail anything they're working on to go back and rehash this. So would it be acceptable just to say, ask them to write us a recommendation letter, but not go so far as to amend? I mean, I think we can hash out the ordinance language above the, you know, but as long as we have their opinion to work with, I think that should give us some guidance. And since it's a pretty minor change if we wanted to make the change. So I think we could do it that way. If that's sound good. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is the request for the fire tap for Richard Dean on Apple Valley Road.
Oh, that's it.
We have a,
Jeff, you want to come up here and sit? Huh? Becker? I'm sorry, Jeff Becker, over here, where the... Jeff is the builder for Mr. Dean on this lot, and Mr. Dean was not able to make it here tonight, so Mr. Becker is here in his place.
all right. Is there a staff report first, or how do you
Short
want to
one
move
here.
forward?
So Mr. Dean is requesting a 1-inch fire tap from the town of Lyons for his home on Apple Valley Road. Mr. Dean lost his home in the 2013 flood, and he did at that time have a 3/4 inch water tap for his home. The recommended actions from staff would be to grant Mr. Dean the permission to tap the Lyons water line for a fire tap. Staff will draft a letter that Mr. Dean would sign stating that he will not use the water line for anything other than emergency. Staff is working on a document that will be recorded stating the 1-inch tap is for fire suppression only. That will be recorded and will stay with the property. If anyone were to buy the property, it would be on the deed so that everyone would know. It's like in the future when we're all not here, why do they have a 1-inch tap? So we're trying to keep track of these that are going to be happening up there. So staff would like to keep track of the taps. There are several properties in Apple Valley that may be asking for the same thing. We want to make sure in the future that they are known to be only fire taps. Staff has also considered charging a monthly base rate for the fire tap. If the board feels this is reasonable, they should direct staff to amend the ordinance to include this. The background information is that Lyons Fire Department or District is requiring new homes to have either a fire tap hooked to a sprinkler system or other fire suppression acceptable to the Lyons Fire District. And Boulder County Building Pit requires any more mitigation of wildlife risk. Permits would be issued by Boulder County as this is an outside the town limits. Mr. Dean has stated that he would also pull a Lions permit since it is our water line, and he would be hooking up to, and the fire suppression for fire suppression and his drinking water. Mr. Dean knows that he would be responsible for all costs from the water main to and including inside his home. And this would include him getting a building permit for us to have our building permit people look at it also. The county and fire district are requiring this suppression in new construction, and Apple Valley Homes present a unique situation that they are on Lyons Water but not located in the town limits. We can work with the owners to install the separate fire suppression and backflow device or deny access to the municipal system and have owners seek another source. UEB is also looking at this, so Chair Kaplan did find that there is a meter that can be put on these 1-inch, which we thought there couldn't. That would actually, it'll help us to be able to control leaks or, not that we think they're going to use it, but if there was a leak, we'd need to be able to see that it was happening. So, I don't know if Mr. Becker has anything to say.
So is the house been built or no?
No, we're just starting construction. We've got the foundation in at this time, so.
Are there any other homes on Apple Valley that have a fire tap?
We found out after the fact that the DeBoom property has one, but it was never recorded with the town, never inspected by the town. And so we have some researching to do there. And so we're assuming now that anyone who has rebuilt or is rebuilding that is on the town's water line is going to be required to do this. So we need to come up with a mechanism to, it's an unusual circumstance in that they're being mandated by Boulder County and the fire district, but they're not in control of the water line it's attached to. So they left us out of the first one, and we were made aware by Mr. Dean. He came forward and requested it, which was nice, made us aware of it, and so now we need a process or some direction from the board on if we're interested in doing this or you want to require something else.
Mr. Carvis.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, thanks for being here. In my meeting minutes, the meeting I missed, the UEB, you had mentioned there were more than, how many undocumented water taps were there in Apple Valley that you'd found? It was in the UEB minutes that you had mentioned you were there. There was more than one.
Some properties on Apple Valley have 3 taps.
And we just recently found out about this, correct?
Well, they were recorded on the deeds. This brought it to our attention.
It brought to our attention.
So we pulled out everyone's deeds and found how many taps were associated and must have been negotiated at the time we ran the water line through their properties. That's how they got it. When they negotiated running the water line to our water tank, they must have negotiated with each owner how many taps they would get based on the size of their property.
Are there
So-
meters associated with these taps?
Those who are connected to the water line are metered. Yes, fire not. But those are 3/4
Yeah.
inch.
Okay. I don't know this gentleman. I'm sure he's very trustworthy. But working, I mean, there's a saying in state law that the aardvark gets him tomorrow and his family, and no one exists. Just because you have a signed document with them saying no one's going to use that tap, who buys the land after that? Or 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now? As this board knows, I like to look out for 10, 15, 20 years for the townspeople and people. I don't have a problem with this. I would like to see the owner have to buy the tap for that so we can monitor water. It does pick up leaks. And should he sell, something happened, the property exchanges hands, who's to know? Because we do have contractors in town that have tapped into things without telling anybody, put
Not by the
valves.
So not by the tap, by the meter? Is that what you meant to say? Okay.
Yeah, a meter on the tap, have a meter there, it's part of the deal. Because that's how, if you really want to keep track of it and really watch over the next 40 years what water goes through that tap, you've got to do it through a meter, and that's the only way to do it. Having a signed agreement and a handshake is great for this person now because we all trust him. What about 5 years from now? 20 years from now?
I truly believe that Mr. Dean is willing willing to work with us.
Oh, I know.
and,
It sounds that way.
Yeah.
would-
That's what-
I don't think that he would
Yeah.
have any problem doing a meter if we can find one that won't.
Yeah, for
What do
us
you
to have a
say?
meter and a shut-off, but not restrict the.
Oh, absolutely.
water.
Yeah.
No,
We-
yeah.
We need the pressure. I
Yeah, you
think
need the
that
fire flow. You
line's
can't
at
restrict, I know that.
110, 120 pounds of pressure, and we want to try to maintain all that we can.
Oh, yeah. And so
I'm more
that's,
than happy to do
I don't have a problem moving, if what's, but like I said, it's, gotta have a meter and probably needs to be checked. Make sure those numbers haven't moved yearly,
Inspected.
just like we do with everybody else. Like I said, this individual probably won't do it, honest individual, don't know him, I trust him, but like I said,
That's why I said we want to come up with something that kind of.
and I would like to see if we could do it, since there's already one out there, if Leo, we can do it retroactive to catch the one that doesn't have a meter on it and make a meter go on that one.
Trustee Browning?
I guess my first question to staff is, how would this affect our IGA with Longmont about a number of taps and our surplus number of taps? Are they just going to ignore this one because it's a fire use, an emergency use only tap? Or are they going to enter this into the formula?
It's a good question. I would have to have that discussion with them if you decide you want to pursue this.
Because, I mean, we had a lot of recent discussions about our narrow surplus of number of water shares compared to the number of taps we had of record. And before I could support this, I would have to know that if we, particularly if there are others waiting in line, that Longmont's going to say, oh, even though it's not being used right now, that's actually another tap that could be used, and we got a plan for the water, and we're going to enter that into the formula. And we could wipe out our, I think at one point we were told that there was like a 2.5 water share surplus, and that may have been revised since then.
That's correct.
But if so, I'm reluctant to set a precedent for even one, but certainly 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fire taps, unless we know that it's not going to wipe out that surplus. Couple of other questions that I had. Everybody hopes it never happens, but if there is an emergency, either this house or another one, and they actually use a lot of water to fight a fire, I guess the owner gets billed for that water, and at what rate?
Traditionally, if water is used to fight a fire, it is not charged. But if it's metered, you would be able to do that.
Right.
And I would assume you would just charge it at the base rate of what we pay for the water, since it's, a disaster or tragedy,
But
versus
Yeah.
increasing that.
People in Apple Valley, for their normal monthly water use, pay what,
They pay
2
double.
times?
Double.
So, yeah, that's something else I think we would need to clarify. If you actually have to use a high number of gallons of water in a fire, I think we need to be clear on who pays for it at what rate. The base rates and other issues. Staff recommending that the board require a monthly base rate payment because you've got a tap there, or not?
We've only had preliminary discussions about it, and we've started to vet the pros and cons of both ways. So if you choose to send this back to the UEB, or you want staff to make a recommendation, we can do that. I'm not prepared tonight to.
Okay, so we're not really being asked to make a decision tonight. It's just we're willing to consider this, and we would like recommendations from staff and the UEB. Is that
Well, these are
the stage
all
we're
board
at?
requests that are on your packet tonight. These are citizens that
We're just
brought
giving
forward an
direction.
agenda
I'm just giving
request.
direction, okay. And I guess another question on the
He would
particular.
love for you to do that tonight.
Another question
So you can do it.
on the particular circumstances of this property. I looked it up on the Boulder County Assessor site, and would this be at 488 Apple Valley, or?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. It also shows, is there another house at 556 Apple Valley that
Yes.
the Dean's?
Yes, the dean's also own a residence there.
So and that one was built since the flood, right?
Correct.
There was an addition built on that one after. the
Okay. And what's the situation there with respect to a fire tap?
flood. They do not have a fire tap on that residence.
But Boulder County approved
It
the...
wasn't substantial new construction.
Okay.
It was more of a remodel kind of. an
So
addition.
Boulder County hasn't required one for that other property, but they are requiring.
This is a whole new
Yeah,
development.
this is a
Okay.
new build, so the
Right.
IRC does
And-
require a sprinkler.
As I understand from the materials you sent us, in theory, there's another way to do it of a cistern and well permit, but as a practical matter, that really just doesn't work, or what?
So you can do a 300-gallon cistern. Those are designed to last for about 3 minutes, just to try to get the occupants out of the house safely. And those are subject to if you have electricity or not. If the power goes out in the fire, you don't have a pump to circulate that water. So talking with Mr. Hoffman, this is his preferred method because this would guarantee that you would have water on site.
Would Boulder County approve the construction permit with basically a temporary, with a 300-gallon cistern that lasts for 3 minutes? That's something they would
That's something
approve?
that they do approve, yes.
Interesting.
The fire suppression is the same. It's only meant to last for, that's only like 10 minutes, isn't it?
No, it's like 3 minutes.
It's
enough
3
to get
minutes
the
too.
occupants
It's just
out.
enough to get
That's it.
occupants out. It's not to put out the
Just a
fire.
life safety thing. It doesn't fight the fire.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Roberts and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I think we have to be clear, we don't leave any legends that somebody got a tap without a meter anymore. So I feel like we should make sure we put meters on everything, even in these situations.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I agree with the requirement for a meter on the tap. A couple of questions. One is I was wondering if the tap could be positioned so that it could be available to multiple properties, or at least the two properties that the dean's own.
You know, we currently, as of yesterday, or maybe it was Friday, got a fire hydrant installed right in front of his house.
Oh,
So there is more than adequate water there to fight fires. in that
at
area, so.
the other.
But the sprinkler will still be required.
Yeah, even though we have that, they still require sprinklers.
Oh. So there is a fire hydrant
No, with our new water line.
with
Yeah,
the new water
the
line?
new
It
water
will be.
line, they-
Will be.
They just put in a shiny new hydrant there. So.
Right. And that would be, that's positioned, so is it 500 feet? Is the,
JJ's got 1,500 feet of hose
15.
on his truck, so
Okay.
there's another one up at the Antelope turnoff that's 1,500 feet away.
okay, yeah, my concern was that, especially like at this time of year, having fire suppression out there is a very good thing. And so, yeah, from that perspective, I think we would want to tilt to the degree possible in the direction of having water available to suppress fires out there.
One of the reasons that this time is of the essence for Mr. Dean is because the water line in front of his properties will be open with this, or is open with this Apple Valley water line relocation. So there is a desire to try to tap it if it's approved while that line is open versus rip up the work we just complete again. So what's your timing on construction?
You know, they are going to complete the line. They need to complete the work and test it before they do any of these taps. So at that time, they would
So we have
access it
some
and
time?
put the taps in. So there is a little bit of time to get that accomplished. So I'm not sure what their construction schedule is.
They want to be done by end of October or November. It's not a very long project.
Well, I mean, I think fire suppression is really prudent. So, I mean, I have no objection to the fire taps. I think that makes sense. And I think it is good to check with, I think understanding how Longmont's going to view these to me is kind of the biggest factor. I think it goes without saying we'll meter it and, you know, be able to track any water going through it. But I would hope that Longmont would look at this as a different situation than counting it toward how many water shares we have to maintain. And I thought we said we found we had more water shares than what we originally thought. So I'm not too concerned about the water share issue, but I do think we need to clarify with Longmont. And since we are discussing their IGA currently, it seems like good timing to do that. So I have no objection to moving forward with us. I think it makes sense to let staff confer with UEB and come up with a recommendation for whether base fees are warranted or what do you recommend? That would be my suggestion. Any other comments? Sounds like there's sufficient agreement to move forward as long as it's metered and answer the open questions. Okay.
Mr. Dean has also voiced that he's willing to pay for the entire cost of this, from tap to the meter housing, the yoke, the meter, whatever's required there, so.
I appreciate that. Read that in his letter, so that's appreciated. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Trustee Browning?
One more comment. I would like for the UEB to look at this before we and give us recommendations before we finally give direction to do this, because there have been problems in the past with things that the UEB wasn't asked to review that related to water taps and shares and that type of thing. I really would like to hear from them about this. And the Longmont question is critical. I think that has to be addressed before we could ever give direction to proceed with this. And so basically, my suggestion is UEB look at it, staff confer with Longmont about it, and then it come back to the board on a quick basis if possible, because I think we need to have those pieces of information before. I need those pieces of information, at least for me, before I would feel comfortable in giving direction to proceed.
Nope. When I said that, I meant there's enough agreement to at least keep digging and answer the open questions. So I think the expectation is it will come back to us once we have that. Okay, thank you. The next item is the request from Habitat. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Request from Habitat for Humanity to the BOT for the reduction of fees associated with the PUD amendment. Is there a staff report?
Would you like Dave Emerson to be on the phone, because he said that we could call him? Or do you think?
Let's see where we go. We may not need him.
All right, are you doing the staff?
No, he is.
Oh, I am. So, when we had to update the PUD for Habitat, we do not and did not have a procedure for doing an amendment to a PUD. So it was classified as an entire rezoning. However, usually it doesn't take that much to modify a PUD. We did have to spend some hard costs related to the PUD update, including publication to the newspaper, distribution to all the neighbors, and there was another recording costs, which probably were, we couldn't get into the accounting system because it died, but it was probably somewhere around $400 for all of that. We also probably had some attorney fees that we haven't been able to identify at this point. The last time we went through the PUD, the attorney fees were somewhere around $25,000. I don't think they would be even close to that right now. But there will be some substantial attorney fees. So the fee that went into the PUD was a $500 application fee, which is stated as non-refundable, and a $1,000 liability account, which we bill against for any hard costs. Dave Emerson and Habitat have submitted a letter, which is in your packet, requesting that the town waive those fees. But I wanted to make you aware that we do have some cost associated with the processing of that PUD.
But you don't know what the costs are?
Unfortunately, we don't know what that cost is as of yet. Well, approximately $400 and everything except for attorney fees. And we weren't able to get the attorney fees.
Trustee Farrell?
So I just wrote down what you were saying, but the application fee is $500, and then there was $1,000.
Of a liability account. So
Liability.
that's a drawdown account, which we bill against until it's 85% depleted. And then we ask for a re-up on that. So they resubmit up to $1,000 and we bill against that account.
So it's not.
When it is not used, we reimburse the applicant.
Okay, so I was thinking $1,900, but based on what you're saying, it's $100 or $900.
$500 plus $1,000. So in
15.
total, their application and their liability account was $1,500.
But not plus 400 for the costs of the papers, the recording, and notifying neighbors?
So that was what they paid, 1,500. We know we've expended somewhere around 400, and we don't know the attorney costs on top of that.
Okay.
So normally we don't give the 500 back. That's the application fee, that's staff costs.
Okay.
So it comes off of the 1,000, so the 400 would come out of 1,000.
Got you.
Plus, yes.
Plus attorney fees.
Other comments or questions? The staff have a recommendation?
I would recommend that the trustees refund the application fee, and we bill the hard costs so that the rest of the, it isn't a cost to the rest of the town.
Thoughts? Trustee Browning?
The attorney's fees seem, if I remember the discussion right, seem to really relate to the fact that we didn't have in our PUD process a mechanism for amending a PUD after it had been initially approved, right?
There was some of that, yes, correct. There was a write-up on the ordinance itself, and then there was some investigation into how you amend the PUD.
Yeah. I don't know, to me, that's sort of something that the town needed to fix, not just with respect to this PUD, but any PUD that we may, existing or in the future, that we may want to create a process for amending without having to go through the whole process again. So, to me, that's something that I think is basically fixing a town ordinance, and it's I can see not billing Habitat for that because it's going to apply generally to ordinances. I'm okay with billing them for the actual hard costs of the publication and the recording and that type of thing, but I guess that's where I come out, that we could recover our hard costs, but I think I think the attorney's fees is something that we needed to spend to fix an existing oversight in our PUD ordinance. So.
Yeah, I would actually agree for the most part. I feel like this was an anomaly because we just happened to not have that. So, but I actually was thinking, if we say the application fee is non-refundable, that's like a minimum just to get us to fix this problem. And it sounded like there were also some construction oversights, involved in this too. So I was actually thinking not refund the application fee, make that kind of the standard. We make everyone do that and just waive the attorney fees and the hard cost and leave it at that.
I'm good with that.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Would you entertain a motion at this point?
Sure.
I would like to move that the town waive the $1,000 general liability fee.
Yes, we call it escrow or liability account. Yes.
Yes, for Habitat.
Is that sufficient to cover
Yes.
everything? Okay.
Second that then.
All right. Any further discussion? Trustee Farrell?
So I just want clarification. We're just covering the liability account, not attorney fees? Because you didn't say the attorney fees.
The effect of it is that we would be charging the $500 application fee. That's all.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's the way I interpret it, is that we would assume the $1,000 would have covered everything, maybe some addition, but I see your point too. So I think our intent is that we're going to bill them $500 and call that good. So, okay. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. And it passes 6-0, thank you. This might be a good time for a break before we get into bears.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Because we've lost our audience anyway.
There, we're gonna have beers.
No, it isn't, okay.
Well, Barney, did you notice? Old-fashioned problem solving? Like
I'm
the
waiting
key
for
count,
Caleb
pros,
to
cons,
come
no
back.
emotion, it was just boom, 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 boom. That was it. It's very nice to read these days.
That was a
The
good
old-fashioned,
memo.
you remember that? What?
Which one?
The way she wrote it was old-fashioned.
Oh, yeah.
Problem solving. There's
Definition
no
of
emotion,
problem.
we gave emotion. You just went down the T account, pros, cons, good, bad, good. Here it all is out there for you to look
Okay.
at. And that's- yeah,
So we've decided Ariel will write all the future memos for All right, the next item is the discussion about bear-proof trash cans. I've received several emails from residents asking us to have a discussion about whether we are interested in doing something with this. So staff prepared a lovely memo, lots of thoughtful consideration. So I'll let you start with the overview.
Okay. Thank you. So firstly, I'm a student at CU Denver, and this was part of an assignment for, I'm going for my master's in public administration. So the assignment was to do a real policy analysis, do a real governing body on a real issue, and this is hot right now. So that would explain why it's so lengthy and a little cumbersome at times, but that's really just what this is, of looking at different alternatives than what we're doing now for the bear resistant bins. I also just learned recently, so disregard bear proof. They say bear proof isn't possible, it's bear resistant, so, so sorry. But yeah, so kind of just a brief look at what's some ideas, some alternatives, but also what our locals waste haulers, just the cost. I think that was kind of the big crux of this, or at least part of it. And Western, in one way, are Lion's two biggest, at least residential servicers, waste haulers. And I, at least, was a little surprised at how inexpensive. I think I was just expecting way more, but One Way offers bear-proof bins for residential. The 30-gallon bins, their most popular size, for $75, or you can do a 24-month lease for $350 a month. And then Western has their own bins. They retrofit to their trucks. They don't have people doing the bins, whereas One Way does. So they have their own bins that just like retrofit to the truck. It clicks in, and they can do it that way. And that's only, at least in the city of Boulder right now, they do $3 extra a month for residentials. So. Ideas. Is there
We barely
anything?
get references in our memos, and so I really thought I'd give you an A. Just, it was very well referenced.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so questions or comments from the board? Mayor Pro Tem?
One question is, was there any possibility of some options on sizes of bins? So people who have just a small amount of garbage could have a smaller bin, and bigger families have a big bin?
Yeah, I know. Yes, I think what I took from these, I actually talked to 3 United as well as One Way and Western. It sounded like they can accommodate to what people are doing right now. So all 3 of them said their biggest market residentially, at least around here, is the 30-gallon, 32-gallon bin. Sometimes people have more of those. That I think that also would be relevant if somebody only picked up once every, like, bi-monthly. So maybe it's the same size bins, they're just serviced less frequently and charged less, I think, just for the bear resistance part, to keep it in a bin of the general size.
That would be the bare minimum for the bear resistance.
Let's see how many puns we can work into this discussion. I have a question about the administrative aspect of this. So it seemed to me like the recommendation really was that it'd be better to go with just universal, everyone's required to have bear-resistant cans or in containers. It sounds like the kind of, were you saying you prefer not to have during certain hours part of this as part of that because of the administrative burden to oversee that?
Yeah, well, in my research, I found other cities, Vail, kind of the more Steamboat, they're really strict on when these bins are out. But that was a mix of more of some of these cities do allow regular bins just to be secured indoors somewhere and not a blanket bear-proof bin. So I think there's a lot of variation with it, but having bear-proof bin out just certain times of the day would also be kind of an important element of it. I think it's in here somewhere. Vail, it's really strict. There's a no warning. If it's out past, on trash day past 7 p.m., you're fine.
Is that any bin, even a bear-resistant bin?
That's a good question. I think actually, Vail might have done all of it, the timing and the bear-proof bins blanket. I think they just have a really bad bear problem. Same with Steamboat. A lot of these, I was surprised that there's a lot of cities increasingly, especially in Colorado, who are picking up these ordinances. But I do think I can certainly follow up, but I do think Vail is strict bear-proof bin and strict hours.
I think it would be kind of helpful to know that, because I think if what I had in mind was you either had a bear-resistant, bear-proof container. I think it's really the people who have no choice but to leave their bins outdoors. I think anyone else who, although I'm still amazed that occasionally I will see someone put a bin out overnight, and usually it's people who recently moved here and don't know, and all they have to do is clean up all that trash one time and they never do it again. But with the recent issues, I'm becoming more and more concerned about, a bear entered a house 2 doors down from me, went in the back door, came back a second time. When they're entering people's homes, and then we also had a bear go through every car that was unlocked in Eagle Canyon, opened every car door. It looked like somebody had gone through the neighborhood and literally, it was really kind of comical. He's really good at opening doors. He didn't scratch the car or anything. He just literally opened the doors and
What night was that?
moved on. It was a couple weeks ago.
Barney, where were you?
So, I think the urgency here is just that they seem to be learning new behaviors and becoming more aggressive. We had one that was up a tree at the market. He had tried to kind of get in, and we've been working on keeping him out of there. And there's a waiting list for commercial bins, just so you know. But he was aggressive, and he kind of charged at my husband when he tried to kind of chase him off, trying to hash him. And then what we found is that he's been dragging trash and stashing it in places, like taking it a little ways away and grabbing the trash bags. He knows if he makes a mess, he gets noticed. So now he's even learned that if I just hide my trash up here where no one sees me, they don't know I'm here, kind of thing. And so they're getting really, really smart. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, whether I fully agree. It needs to be across the board if we're going to do this. I don't think it's going to help because, we're having as many problems in the residential areas as we are in commercial. It's not a commercial bin issue. It's everywhere. And, Bunny, who spoke a couple meetings ago, I think some people who don't have maybe as new construction, or if their house, they have, chicken coop kind of fenced in, screen porches. You would be afraid to hang out in your own backyard after certain hours. And so I'm in favor of us at least exploring this and seeing what the right balance is. I know this year has been exceptional, but in talking to some people also who work in the parks up there. They're just saying this is going to become the new normal. There's just so much more development anymore. We're not really considered, even Estes Park, to be all that rural in our case, and that the bears are just adapting. And so I really do think I don't think we can wait for the maybe pay-as-you-throw to see if that solves it. I think we need to start figuring out what's the right policy for Lions. And if we could let people get by, as long as it's only out within certain hours, although I'm not even sure if that's going to work. So if your trash is only out from 7 a.m. to, say, 5 p.m., you could maybe get by without a bear-proof container. But we're seeing the bears, and, we had one go through our neighborhood while it was light out two nights ago. We started walking our dog only, while it's still light, and we found out that there was a bear in the van its backyard. Yeah. At the time, we thought we were finally, being smarter. So I don't know. It sounds to me like I have some issues or concerns about safety if we don't take some sort of action. Trustee Browning?
Yeah, a couple of questions. I understand what Aspen and Steamboat do, but they're like Western Slope communities and really tourist destinations, and they may have reasons for doing things they do that are different from us in some respects. Did you look at what other front range communities have done, like the ones that border up to the hills, like Boulder, I guess Loveland, Netherlands, kind of up in the hills? Do they have ordinances that require bear-resistant containers, or is it optional, or what do they do?
So the city of Boulder, I know for sure, they have kind of a weird one. People who live west of, I think, Broadway, so theirs is locational. So everyone west of, I think, Broadway mandated bear-proof resistant bins.
Okay.
Yep.
My mother-in-law can't open hers because it's too tough. Seriously.
So
that's just so you know.
Yeah.
I just wonder what like Ned and Loveland and the others that are kind of like foothills type communities. I'm kind of curious.
I can share a look into it. I do know Boulder, especially that some of these waste haulers are from Boulder, so in fact, that's why Western made that adaptable bear-proof bin one, so it fits in, knowing they have a big population in Boulder to serve. I can look through more like Front Range towns along our neck of the woods.
And did you talk to the names, the new sustainability coordinator who's working on the details of the pay-as-you-throw proposals that I don't think have actually been received yet?
Yep. And so that was something I certainly thought about while writing this and doing it, but I think, at least as far as single haulers go, and in fact, I sat in on the single hauler on this pre-bid meeting last week, it came up in discussion. So while I didn't address it in this, thinking this was more immediate, an immediate thing, in that discussion, it sounded like Western, since they make it just would vary depending on if we did do that single hauler. So Western,
right,
they make them in-house, so they would have to make enough to serve all of Lions. One way, the other big one, they do provide them for their residential clients, but they said they probably wouldn't have enough right off the bat to allow everyone to buy from them at the $75 marker, but they could get some. I think they get them just at cost from the supplier, whoever. But they also allow people to get their own. So we're starting to see them at Home Depot and just regular stores, because they have people doing the trash instead of the machine. They said they can be sourced from anywhere, including us, but also Home Depot or wherever.
The SFC discussed this at their meeting last week, I guess it was, and there were concerns raised by some of the SFC members that we don't know where the pay-as-you-throw program is going to go, whether we're going to even have one or not, and if so, how exactly it's going to be structured. They were concerned that if there was a mandate that went out next week, everybody has to get a bear-resistant container, that people might buy, go out and spend their money to buy bear-resistant containers, and then the net result of the pay-as-you-throw program could be that those containers weren't going to fit with what we did, because part of that was 32, 64, 96-gallon cans to give people that option, and I don't know if they're 96-gallon bear-resistant containers or not, or how much they would cost. And so that's why I was asking if you talked about it, because I've got a concern about suggesting or making people go spend money for a can that could be 6 months from now you can't use, or maybe it would fit fine. We don't know.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what his input was.
Yeah, well, I guess Garrett, you mean?
Yeah.
I guess I don't know if he had, I think we just kind of talked about it. Oh, there's a bear behind you, but very appropriate.
As I'm asking the questions.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Please.
And one other kind of question or thought that is there a third? You outlined two options and outlined them very well in your memo. Is there a third option that would say basically under a town ordinance, everybody's responsible for keeping their trash from being scattered in the streets or wherever by bears, but leave it up to the citizens how they address that? Safest way would be to go get a bear-resistant container. Other citizens who might not want to do that cost may have a totally secure area, a bin or a garage or something that they only put out their trash on trash day. But basically, if you choose not to buy a bear-resistant container and your non-bear-resistant container gets scattered, you pay not just a nominal fine, but you basically get fined under the ordinance. And so to basically give them a choice of, is it worth it to me to go out and buy a bear-resistant container, or do I think, do I think my system of keeping it in my garage until 8 o'clock on trash day is good enough to work, and let them decide whether to take that risk? Is that a third possibility?
Sure. Sure. But I think it lends itself to this variation of what is a secure place. Someone's garage might be very secure when the next person's like greenhouse, or like a kind of chicken coopy thing. I don't know.
I think if you were to go that route, you would have to have a pretty big stick to accompany it. So there would have to be like the veil, like it's up to you. You figure out how you want to secure your trash, but if a bear gets into your trash, then it's going to be a steep fine.
Yep.
The challenge there is then, I guess it's going to be complaint driven. Someone would have to report someone. I find even in, as much as we all love to complain on Facebook about our neighbors, we don't actually like to turn our neighbors in for things, like actually get them in trouble. So the question is how successful would that be? Because nobody, if there really is a big steep fine, maybe hopefully they'd talk to their neighbor. The problem is I think in what I got from your memo is that once the bears learn this behavior, you have a dead bear. And so, and I will tell you that when we called animal control about the one that we had at the market, it was an untagged bear, which they said is really unusual to have a bear that size causing this much havoc and not have it be a bear they had any knowledge of. So that concerned them more than anything. So anyway, Trustee Farrell.
Pardon me for being a little bit redundant, so bear with me. I was waiting.
I don't have the picture of that.
I think you hit every single point that I was going to ask. So I think ultimately we should put this forward for further consideration. I tend to be more concerned about it's a chicken or egg, I guess, because of the pay-as-you-throw, that we certainly have heard from a number of people who are not happy about their liberties being taken away. If that is something that we, choose to mandate. And so, because of that, my first initial reaction is the third that, Mark Browning proposed, although I think ideally the first option is really the best. So I'm kind of, I'm not sure on where we should land, but finding out, I'm very curious what the communities that are similar to us, what they're doing that are really closer to home.
Sure. Trustee Roberts?
I think you could make a valid argument one way or the other about whether we should sort of roll this into the comprehensive pay-as-you-throw or single hauler policy that's upcoming, or separate it so that it's, I don't know, a soft landing towards that end. You mentioned, Mayor, a big stick and the fact that a complaint-based enforcement's probably ineffective. And Ariel, I think you identified that it's very expensive for staff to enforce when we have 5 or more days a week of collection with the 3 or more haulers that we have. So it seems impractical also, and perhaps just ineffective to just say we have a policy that has a fine. But I wish I had a better feel for what this process is going to be, and what with considering a mandatory single hauler. I can't think of anything that sort of galvanizes passion amongst the residents of Lyons. It's so much farther than the trade-off of like a cost benefit. Like there's some significant romantic considerations involved in the trash haulers, and
It's a really nice way of saying it.
literally, and something that's just really a huge symbol of freedom and the American way and the Wild West cowboy attitude. So I don't know if we've got. Is it a discussion of what we think we're going to do, or what the timeline will be?
Well, if I'm remembering correctly, our proposals should be back fairly soon for the single hauler. I mean, all we're doing tonight is deciding, do we want to consider some sort of ordinance? And so this is really just about, do we want to give staff direction to go any further with trying to figure out whether something should be considered or not? With the single hauler being fairly close, I would imagine we're going to get these RFPs, what, September was the timeline?
I think we're scheduled October 7th meeting.
Yep.
So September, October, I mean, we wouldn't really realistically have a draft ordinance in front of us for a good month anyway, probably. So we could wait until those RFPs come in. At least at this point, we've kind of had an initial discussion. Let's see if we get some public feedback and kind of see where it goes from there. In the meantime, I would encourage the town to continue with the education. It's great. I know they had an event tonight to kind of talk about how to live with bears and wildlife. Hopefully people are doing a better job. I am hearing kind of fewer complaints, and I've heard from the residents who spoke, that things have gotten a little bit better. But we also had a lot of festivals in town, and so you just wonder kind of how is that impacting things. I hadn't heard if the festivals had issues or not. I know one person did, because they came into the market and told us about it. But other than that, I'm not sure how much of a problem they've had.
Well, we can expect to be recalled in January.
For which issue? I think throw them all out there.
There's a recall election going to be held in Nederland for the mayor and 2 trustees. Even though they have municipal elections scheduled in April, they're going to have to probably have a recall election within 6 months of that and pay for it.
Are we volunteering to be recalled?
Can I go first?
No. Okay. Trustee Karamis, final comment?
Final comment, that's a
This
lot
is
of pressure.
it.
That's a
We're
lot of
good. We
pressure.
got other things to do.
Now, I can't remember if you and I were talking about it separately or if it was in your discussion, not only on the bear-proof cans, but we have a lot of people here that like to compost, not just trees and shrubs, food scraps.
Yep.
Mr. Brown lives down the rocks from me, so I decided to do a huge composting pile I had back on an acreage in Nebraska that has everything cooking in it. Well, he doesn't want me doing that because that's going to bring the same critters we were just talking about that we want stuff locked in your garage, right smack in the middle of yards. So I see kind of a hand in hand. If you could do one, we got to touch on the other. And unfortunately, that's going to really bother a lot of people, especially on the ecology board, that composting everything possible is a good thing. But I think the town administrator received pictures from my driveway with fox bringing breadcrumbs. Remember that? Did I send that to you? Yeah. It's not just bears. It's raccoons. Like they got that opposable thumb too. Those little suckers. It shouldn't. But we also have people right down by the post office that throw all their apples from the yard over the fence every year, every fall. Their apples are sitting there.
Okay.
So it's kind of a maybe a little bit bigger issue.
All right, thank you. So I think our direction is let's kind of sit tight and see what the proposals come back as. I think is what I'm kind of hearing. I don't know. I don't know that there was really much.
Sure.
A lot of talking, but no real consensus.
But perhaps seeing perhaps what some of the communities,
Sure.
that information could be gathered between
Yep.
now and
Keep researching.
whenever.
You got it. Sure.
How's that?
That sounds
Does that
good.
sound all right?
Yeah.
Then we're ready to go
Yeah.
once we know what our proposals come back.
Sure.
I mean, if the proposals for the single hauler really aren't viable and aren't what we thought they might be, we may want to move on. So,
Yeah. Plus, looks like when you Google when do bears hibernate, November. So then that gives us a little more time too. You know, if this starts October, November.
yeah, and I thought your recommendation about a good, good length of time before you start finding people or requiring
Sure.
compliance was a good recommendation. So thanks for doing that. Really
Yeah,
good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you have another?
Oh, cool.
I'm sorry. Thanks. It was a joke. We could use a joke. Anybody last bear jokes before we move on?
Grr, let's move on.
Sorry.
All right.
I had it thrown out there.
On to number 5, Resolution 2019-81.
Well,
Staff
I am
report?
excited to bring forward this resolution for discussion. This is the proposal for a resolution with the City of Longmont for the third amendment to our water services agreement that we've had in place for many years. This amendment is bringing forward the possibility of allowing the town of Lyons to dedicate shares of water other than CBT for certain projects. And the City of Longmont in the agreement is proposing that those projects be categorized into 3 areas, either affordable housing with rentals that are 60% area median income and deed restricted, or for sale housing, deed restricted at 80% area median income, average median income. For economic development, as approved by the Board of Trustees, and/or commercial development as approved by the Board of Trustees. The City of Longmont has identified that Lake McIntosh water shares are available and acceptable to their portfolio instead of CBT units for those 3 categories. Instead of 1 CBT unit, which is now selling between around 55,000, potentially up to 60, Lake McIntosh water sells for about 1/10 of that. And it would require 1.4 shares of Lake McIntosh water to equal 1 CBT share. So this IGA would allow both parties for the town to dedicate Lake McIntosh water and be accepted by the City of Longmont. That's the first part and probably the most important part, very big deviation from the agreement we've had in place for nearly 20 years. The second part of the agreement is actually a dedication of two abandoned water lines that Longmont is no longer needing to use. One that's located within the town of Lyons right-of-way between Clark's and the junction of 3666, and the other crossing Highway 36 between the north and south plants, decommissioned plants. the town would, they would dedicate, I guess they call it donate is their name. They would donate those 2 lines to the town of Lyons, and we would use those for our new sewer line that we're extending to the eastern corridor, which would save us on boring and trenching costs.
Use it as a conduit, or use it as a conduit? to
Use
put
it
other things
as a
into it?
conduit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And we've had engineers run the studies. There is a pipe the entire length, but it is cost effective for this portion. And so this resolution would include both of those items if the board wants to approve that. Or if there's a part of it we want to go back and change, we certainly can do that. If we move it forward, they are interested in presenting this at their August 27th meeting. And if we miss that, it would be September 10th meeting. And again, this could be in effect for our Summit Housing project. They would be eligible for this if this is passed, which would save nearly $1 million that could then be used on other improvements in that proposal. In regard to the pipeline, that time is somewhat of the essence there. If we want to utilize this and fill out the paperwork so that, because the contractor is already under construction on the lift station and will be boring westward and northward shortly, where they would use this in place of that.
Question is for Longmont, would this be how would they be dealing with this, by resolution or by ordinance? So resolution, so it could go into effect immediately. This is really exciting.
This is huge.
I mean, this is really, really big. And, I do think water is, if we have the opportunity to diversify what water can be used for this, I think we should jump on it.
We will have to enter into a relationship with the Lake McIntosh Water District. They're their own district, or similar to like one of the ditch companies, but it's Lake McIntosh. However, the city of Longmont is the majority shareholder of that water, so that's why they think this can happen fairly seamlessly if we want to pursue it.
Trustee Farrow.
So I wanted to ask for clarification of the 3: affordable housing, commercial development, economic development. Do we, in this agreement, pick one of the 3 that if we are using this water share from McIntosh, that it would only be able to go to, say, affordable housing, and that's the one we pick? Or can it be for future and we choose, affordable housing first, and then in the future we, attract for commercial development, and then we can use from that too?
It can be any of the categories.
At any time?
Ongoing.
Then? Okay. Back and
This
forth.
is really generous language.
This is huge. And I think our discussions and our clarification about our water shares and fully understanding that through our primary planning area planning, that we truly can't exponentially grow. I think that has, both of those discussions and just our relationship with them has really helped bring this forward.
Trustee Browning.
Yeah, I had several questions. Would this have any financial impact on our water fund at all? Making this change, of no longer requiring CBT shares?
Certainly, except we.
The owner's going to pay the cost, right, of
The owner's going to pay
whatever
the
shares
cost
they
either way.
provide. So I just wanted to kind of
Brainstorm that.
brainstorm that. Is this going to really affect the water fund? And I was having a hard time answering that.
I don't believe really, because the money that's paid for the share, which is that largest portion, goes to Northern Water.
Right.
It doesn't go to the town. The town receives the tap fees and the, connection, and then we get the public improvement
And that was
from
my
it.
next kind of question, and where I kind of, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but where I kind of figured in my head, if it makes some projects feasible, that because Lake McIntosh shares are a lot cheaper than Colorado Big Thompson shares, in theory, well, not in theory, in actuality, the town could get water tap fees out of those projects that wouldn't otherwise occur, so that it might actually produce a positive, return, more water tap fees. And I know water tap fees are supposed to cover the infrastructure costs, but whether that's a one-to-one
I
relationship
think
has been
that's
discussed by the
something that
UEB
the-
for years, and they've never come to a conclusion. So,
I think that's something the UEB would like to look at again, once we get the budget approved for this year and these meters purchased and installed. They would like to take a look at the tap fees at some point, maybe in 2020. But in regard to these shares, the one thing that's kind of interesting is they are not disallowing it for single-family residential. You still have to buy a CBT unit for that.
okay.
And so it's kind of an interesting dynamic.
Well, but I was surprised they included the economic development.
I was
in
too. I
commercial.
was surprised because it specifically points out that it can be a for-profit business as long as the Board of Trustees identifies it as something that adds jobs or adds to our local economy.
So there's no advance approval categorically being given by this board for something that just may produce 2 jobs or 20 jobs or whatever. Those would still have to be considered project by project by this board or a future board. Well, we know you're proposing this and you're proposing to satisfy your water requirement with Lake McIntosh shares, but we don't really think this is the type of economic development we want. Somebody brings in a porno theater or something like that. A future board of trustees could still say no, even though you tell us you can bring Lake McIntosh water shares. We can still say not the kind of economic development we want to bring into this deal.
I look at this
We
as...
get to pass on it.
The clause was always in the agreement that identified that the town of Lyons would, how did they state that? We would bring forward, provides water rights approved by Longmont. That's always been there. It's just up to this point, the only approved water was CBT. Now they're just opening our portfolio. So to me, when I read this, and I guess you could ask the attorney's opinion, it's up to us as a town and you as the elected officials to decide, does the development meet these 3 categories or not, and which do you want them to bring forward in the portfolio?
In other words, the future board would still have the option of saying, for whatever reasons on this particular project you're proposing, we want you to go get a CBT share. We're not going to approve this for going to Longmont for Lake McIntosh. It's still within the board's discretion.
I think so.
What I'm asking is, just because somebody proposes an economic development that might create a job or 2, that doesn't give them an entitlement to go use Lake McIntosh shares. 'Cause as you read it, it was a economic development proposal approved by Lyons.
It says any proposed new development
Okay, and that was
in our service area. There's another little clause in there.
right.
It's not necessarily something outside our service area because we do have other water providers in our area that enable greater production, increased employment, and a better distribution of goods and services.
Okay.
I mean,
But
can I-
we've got to approve it first.
It does say down below, that in
Right.
accordance with the land use approval or contractual commitments subsequent to the date of this agreement. I mean, what I see this doing is giving us authorization to consider those other things. I would agree that then we need to follow this up probably with a procedure that becomes part of the development application where they can apply to submit McIntosh shares instead of CBT shares, and then they have to tell us how they're meeting this criteria. I think I agree that we shouldn't necessarily convey to anyone that as long as this is what you're doing, you automatically imply that the control still stays with the town. And if the attorney wants to look at this and see if there's any needed changes to that language to make sure that someone couldn't come in and hand the IGA over and say, I'm giving you McIntosh and But I think ultimately, even if they did that, it's subject to our approval of and we would just deny their application, even if we did nothing else. I think you'd still have the ability to say, well.
Or you would negotiate it in the development agreement.
Okay.
Right, that's what I mean. But if it's say it's not maybe a development agreement isn't necessary.
Sure, it's like the new dispensary.
It's just something
They're
that's
just
already
building a new building.
used by right, and there's no anything needed, but they're going to build a new building. I still think the town needs to have that control. And I see it in here, but if we want that to be stronger, I would.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was of record. And the other thing, you already mentioned it in passing that I wanted to make sure was in the record. This would only apply to new development. It's not going to change the rules for any past.
That's how it's currently
Agreements.
worded in the definitions in this new development.
Okay, thank you.
And then the issue with the pipeline, we have had staff do a kind of a pro-con of what is the potential expense inheriting these two large decommissioned water lines could have to us. And knowing that the one is a 24-inch concrete that's been in place for 90 years and has been cameraed. They already cameraed it, cleaned it for us. It's in great shape. The other is a 27-inch steel pipe that is around that same time. But having it be in our right-of-way, not in CDOTs or something else, it is just our cost. It's where our trail would be going. They both seem to be reasonable to inherit and not expect to have any problems with it. We had the engineers take a look at the reports, and Longmont came out and did the inspections and the cammering.
Okay. Trustee Roberts?
Could we go back to the Macintosh shares? The restriction on using these for new development only, that would preclude perhaps affordable housing use determined for, say, like the Shady Lanes area, or?
No, I don't believe so. The new development is only under economic development
I see,
opportunities.
okay, so there would be an opportunity for whatever.
Affordable comes
Yeah.
with the deed restriction.
And then those deed restrictions or covenant controls, are those in perpetuity?
They're filed on the title with a deed.
Not going to have a sunset or expire again, okay.
Deed restricted.
Yeah, and I think if we expect to have any sort of discretion over who we allow to use these shares for economic development or commercial use, we probably want to refine that policy as we implement this, like soon, instead of expect that we can sort of, I don't know, later on it'll be hazardous, I think, to just say like,
Yep.
And also a way to document again that these new developments that are built with Macintosh water and the value that is versus development that dedicated CPT, making sure we keep those separate.
Well, and just food for thought as you think about that particular process is, with the savings, what would we ask in return? Green, build, I mean,
Design
something
guidelines.
returned for that savings that would improve on whatever they're developing.
Yeah, I think there should be some form of an application, and they need to justify why they feel they meet these definitions.
Trustee Roberts?
but perhaps we'd want to maybe specify also, not just ask for what you're, but
Put in a,
I was going to say, if we enter into the market for Macintosh shares, are we going to be creating volatility, do we think? Does anyone have a... I mean, there's been some discussions about establishing a water bank, and is that an effort that perhaps should go hand in hand?
well, I think the intent of the water bank was to be able to assist with affordable housing projects. This may be able to
Would it perhaps
either
make it
replace or
irrelevant?
supplement
right?
it, sure.
I mean, that's kind of my question, is this eliminate that concern? Or do we start driving the shares up, just the first one we buy? Each share has a significant effect on the cost of a next sheriff at CBT. So I guess nobody here knows that.
Trustee Browning and
I
then Mayor
had one
Pro
more
Tem.
question that I forgot to ask. Has this been reviewed by either the UEB or the temporary utilities director? And I know there's some overlap there.
The timing on it was not, we received our final version of this middle of last week, and Attorney Dittman did get to review it before he was fully on vacation. So he has reviewed it for content and form. I have not taken it to the UEB, but they do meet on Wednesday. I have discussed it with the interim utilities coordinator in general, and
Okay.
looks like, an opportunity we've been waiting for a long time.
I would that would be one thing that I would request as part of whatever direction we give to staff, if we give direction to proceed, is that
Add to the agenda.
before we give a final response to Longmont, although it seems like a great deal to me, give the UEB time to offer any suggestions that they may want to make, because this is their area of expertise, more so than mine, certainly.
They did, the city of Longmont said they would like if there's going to be any proposed changes, they need them by end of day Wednesday to be able to get in their next packet. Other ways, we would need to wait until their September 17th meeting.
Well, and keep in mind that Summit's on a timeline to spend this money by the end of September. And so unless we have some kind of really major concern, I don't know why we'd hold this up.
And they have applied, they did apply for an extension of their DR
Oh,
funding.
they did? Okay.
And it appears to me from David Bowman, he's indicated that they have been, I don't know if they've seen it in writing yet, but he told me they've been extended through till July.
Okay, so they've got a little more time. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
But,
But I haven't seen that in writing. He told me that verbally.
okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, but I'm in favor of not dawdling with this. I mean, this is a good opportunity, a good deal. It's been reviewed by legal, and to me, that's where there would be potentially issues. I do agree that the UEB, can look at it, but I would suggest as quickly as possible, even a special meeting if that's possible.
They meet Wednesday.
And, so to me, responding affirmatively and clearly to Longmont as in a reasonably quick time is appropriate. But I do think we may want to take a little more time to develop the process associated with it. Because to me, there's going to be a delicate balance between having some objective criteria, but then on the other hand, not an entitlement. So you can't make the criteria so explicit that, people would say, wow, I know how to fit, answer all those questions. So it's going to be a little bit of a delicate balance. I think we do want there to be discretion on the part of the board, but at the same time, I think we don't want the board for it to be open to capricious and arbitrary conclusions. So, I think the process part of this will actually be important, and that's maybe where the UEB could also, help come up with that process.
Town Attorney.
I mean, I can envision that you would set up a system sort of like, a variance that would go to a board of adjustment or something like that. But if you had criteria set out as to, you have to meet these criteria for your application, and then I think you would have to have a hearing where you made findings as to whether or not those criteria were satisfied and things like that. I think that, I think many of you have said that that would be a good way to do it, but I think if you set that up initially with those criteria, then you would have set, sort of the guideposts for how do you make that decision.
Trustee Roberts, final comment?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay, sorry. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so I guess the only thing is that we didn't really want to bring it back to this board for any further action. So is everyone pretty comfortable with moving forward?
This is a
Assuming
resolution. so you need a
UEB
motion.
kind of,
For both the conduit and the water.
yeah, so we actually need a motion.
To approve resolution 1981?
Mhm.
Second that.
With the
Oh, wait.
Dittman amendments.
Oh,
Was there an amendment you wanted to add?
No amendment.
I don't think we had any amendments for
Well,
this
we
one.
have but which of the PDFs are we approving?
I was looking at the one in the pack.
We have
One is the
Dipman
resolution.
edits.
The res,
Just
The first, it didn't, one of the first PDF you were sent only included the 24-inch line, and the second one is the 24 and 27-inch line.
So we want to approve or both of them?
No, I mean both, we want the one with both lines. I don't know
Okay,
what-
so that's the Dipman edits, right?
I think that we're just approving the resolution, so we could leave it to the attorney to make sure the final
Includes both.
IGA, or that the amended IGA is
The other thing to note
current.
about those lines is that there will be plenty of room if another type of utility that's compatible with sewer could go in there as well.
Good. Does anyone make a motion?
There's the one. Yeah. Oh, I'm on. Okay, never mind. Sorry.
Sorry.
I move to approve resolution number 2019-81. Do I need to read out the whole name?
No, it's okay. Is there a second?
I'll second your motion. I
Okay.
second, yes.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And it approves 6-0. Okay, thank you. We had one item removed from consent. Trustee Browning.
Yes, the item I removed was the contract to do the watering on the Highway 7 embankment, and we've had a lot of inquiries from neighbors, or across the river neighbors. I was just wondering, from what I understand, they're basically going to send a water truck around and water that embankment to try to save. Part of that embankment doesn't have many plants left on it. It never got watered after they were planted. But do we have responsibility to basically maintain that for a couple
2020.
more years? Okay.
Through 2020, November of 2020.
Okay.
So this was an emergency watershed protection project that is outside of our town limits. But we were asked to be the fiscal agent at the time after the flood, and the town agreed to be. And part of that meant maintenance of this area, also watering of a very steep slope, 2-to-1. The container plants are actually doing okay. It's just all of the smaller growth in the netted area is having trouble. Thankfully, we've had enough rain off and on until recently to sustain it to actually the level that the grantor's okay with, but he wants to see it get through this time. So we had to come up with a mechanism. We went out for bids on it because we just simply do not have the staffing nor the equipment to go out there and do this. And we only had the one party, Walsh, that said that they would take care of it through the end of this year and then next year to meet our requirements. And it's paid for through the grant.
Okay. The grant funds it? Okay.
Yeah.
My other question is, there's an existing infrastructure, I guess you could call it, with a tank and some
Yes.
PVC pipes that's, as far as I know, have never been used, partly because
The tank is lower
PVC
than the
pipe,
pipes.
the tank is lower than the pipes, and it's supposed to be gravity fed, and water doesn't run uphill. So what's the proposal for the tank and
Well,
pipes? Going to leave them
we
there because they're
actually-
kind of ugly, just sitting
We
there.
looked at several different options, and one was to, actually, that tank design was approved by the grantor. It was designed by, I think it was OTAC. But we looked at raising the tank higher so that it could gravity flow. We looked at lowering the pipe to be even with the tank. And at this point, they have said that they feel just flood watering it, I think it's once every week or two, is sufficient to meet their needs and will be faster than hauling water, loading it, and then going out there every couple hours and checking it and turning it off.
Are we going to leave the tank and pipes there?
I do not know that answer. I don't know that offhand. Tracy would know that. I can't imagine, there's really no reason I can imagine they need to,
What-
unless
Yeah.
this wouldn't work. And they want us to do something.
Well, comment, whatever engineer designed the water flows uphill without a pump system, let's not hire them for future projects.
I don't think we selected that contractor. We were just the
okay.
recipient of the contract.
Okay.
But I know it wasn't the town engineer, so.
Okay. No, I was sure that it wasn't.
Is there a motion to approve?
I will move to approve item 9.2. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Hold on, excuse me. Let me go back and get it.
Say 6.
6 to a resolution 2019-86 relating to construction agreement for the South St. Vrain Maintenance Project with Walsh Construction.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And it's approved 6-0, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was being good, sorry.
All right, we had one item proposed to discuss whether we want to put it on a future agenda. So this is about special event applications. So Trustee Browning proposes. Yeah, can we get some air going on?
This arose from the event that closed part of Broadway on Sunday and caused a lot of citizen steps.
Sorry.
On.
Sorry.
This arose from an event on a Sunday that closed one lane of Broadway and drew a lot of citizen complaints. And I'm not suggesting that we need to do an ordinance and go through that whole process, but I think there ought to be some kind of policy on major events. I don't have an issue with bike races that stop for a rest stop in Meadow Park or in Sandstone Park or anywhere in town. Town staff is perfectly capable of handling those. But I just thought there ought to be some type of policy of if there's going to be a major event that's going to result in the closure of a town street for a significant period of time or a town park that would interfere with the citizens' use of the park for a significant period of time, that ought to at least be brought to the board's attention before staff signs off on final approval. That's my intention, and I was hoping we could come up with some kind of policy on that. So I'd like to see us discuss that at a future meeting.
So are we going to, what's the goal? To have the board approve these events?
Yeah, just basically to major events, yeah. But and how we define major events is something we need to discuss about. Is it a closure of any street or just a main street in town or something like that? I thought that's something that was worth a discussion of what level of interference with citizens' normal enjoyment of their streets and parks should it rise to before the board would need to say it's okay.
So if someone complains about the Halloween parade, because that is the biggest disruption to traffic we have in the town, probably.
But if it's something that the board has approved as a part of the budget, I don't think we need to revisit it. I think if it's something we budgeted for, outdoor games or good old days of that kind of thing, if it's something that we haven't addressed as part of the budget that we've already signed off on, I think it ought to come to our attention. And I think, and by coming to the board's attention, that would also give any citizen that wanted to say, wait a minute, you're going to close my street, 2 Saturdays from now, I'm having a garage sale or something like that. And again, not for the regular stuff, not for stuff we've budgeted, just for things that are going to have a big impact on, potentially on the town citizens. That was we got to discuss that. And again, we're not asking yes or no here, it's just a topic for future discussion, and I think it's worth discussing.
I guess my concern is that we end up inserting the board into things that it really should be staff managed. I don't dispute having, and what you put in your memo I think makes a lot of sense, having a better permit process. I guess my concern is that there's so many of these events that we don't really have ultimate control over anyway. And if we do start to kind of put up roadblocks to events, take bike race, parade, and we create an avenue for someone to stop it because it's inconveniencing them, then it's going to be really hard to pick and choose which ones, and it comes down to which events your board members like best. Do they like music better than bikes and parades better than parties? I don't know, but to me it seems more like I would absolutely support a better administrative process, but I would prefer to keep the board out of it and I think the ones that we budget and we expend funds for that are community-based events, I agree, but traffic control has never been the factor in whether we continue those events. And we just know we're inconveniencing people. And if most of the community supports it, they'll let us know. But I think occasionally, if we're going to have interferences and ultimately we are one of 5 entities that gets to decide, I think all you're going to end up doing is potentially driving events off that actually could be good events for town. Basing things in town is good for businesses. So I do worry about it becoming overly burdensome administration and taking up board's time for things that staff could manage.
I believe that staff have also indicated we could improve communication by providing you every 2 weeks the list of events coming up over the next, month or however long ahead of time you want. I know that one situation caused some disruption, but I think of the number of events we have every year, having one that was kind of a short notice, we can do better at communicating that. And I do agree, Mayor, that, so many of these things, this wasn't our event. This was Boulder, CSP, the event organizer. They just want to know, can we come through 1 block of your town or 2 blocks? And so we can do a better job of communicating that as well. And if that doesn't work for the board, maybe revisit it. But I just think it's another added. You already have full plates. And then I do think you could run into a situation where, like, a neighbor says, well, this created 200 cars by my house every day, don't offer it, something to that effect. You could have governance by a block of neighbors versus what's best for the entire community.
The other factor is there's some potential cover for staff on this. If the board's not involved and we have a situation recur like happened before, the correct answer on that was staff approved it and the board never knew, the board was never told about it in advance. And so there's some benefit to staff to have, and again, I'm suggesting, and if I'd known we were going to have a full discussion on the merits, I would suggest we figure out what a major event is and focus on park and street closure. You wouldn't need board approval for anything that's in a budget. I'm not trying to have to say the board needs to separately sign off on Halloween or Christmas parades or anything else that we've funded. Nor does the board need to review, like I say, bike events that come through for a rest stop in town. Don't need to be involved in that. But I think if you're going to close part of Broadway on a July 4th weekend, I think the board ought to know about that, because I think citizens ought to know about it. The board is, to me, less important than letting citizens know, and I think that's the way to inform citizens. And so I'd just like to see if we could develop a policy where the board and citizens would be informed in advance of major events that will close a major street or close a park.
So could we direct staff to develop a communications policy around events that involve road closures? I actually think you're right. This event was really more of a communications failure than an event failure. From an event standpoint, I think it was a well-run event. I think it's just caught people off guard. I really do think there was some of the complaints were kind of overblown, in my opinion, based on other days that we've had in there. But I feel like we have other more important things to worry about. This was we have not had consistent complaints about other events that have taken place since then either. I think that event was unique because it was the first time for it, and we didn't have a lot of notice for it. I think those two things really played a big role in the amount of complaints we got. But if we had a better communications plan in advance, would that satisfy you?
That'd be an improvement on
Okay.
what we've got now, yeah.
I think that's a good idea, just to have, what's the communication plan going to be when we have a major closure to the road? I think, anybody have different thoughts? Trustee Roberts?
It seems to illustrate it's not clear whether we're having a discussion that's been noticed or not.
I know, yeah. This is what's hard about this process. Do we want to talk about it again at a future meeting?
I'm just making the point that we have not discussed because we didn't have a notice discussion, whereas here we have.
Well,
So it was just sort of curious to me.
it's a little bit confusing, actually, to decide what we can and
Yeah.
can't talk about. So, because it's on, yeah.
Well, it
But
shouldn't be.
we
I
can
don't
decide
think.
if we
I
want to
think
talk
it
about
should
it
be
again,
clear,
or
right?
how do we want to do it?
I'm okay with directing staff to bring us a communications policy on major events.
Okay.
And then we can talk about their policy draft. I think that would be fine.
So that would be
And-
the future
and If
agenda.
they bring us a policy draft and there's something a board member wants to say, oh, you hadn't thought about this eventuality, we could talk about amending it. But if they would bring us a proposed policy on communicating to the board on major events, that's a good starting point, I think. I'm in agreement with that.
Revisit later if we want to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have another chance to discuss it if we want to.
Okay. It sounds like we'll have an agenda item where we can review a draft policy by board, or by the staff. Okay. All right. Trustee reports? Anyone? Trustee Roberts, you want to start us off?
I don't have anything to report other than we have a EBC meeting scheduled next week, and I believe that's the 23rd. I didn't put that in my notes here, but nothing else in that front, so I have nothing else to report.
Okay.
Should double check my calendar, sorry. 21st of August, Wednesday the 21st at 8:30 a.m.
Trustee Fair?
Oh, okay. So I just wanted to announce that August the 25th, that's this coming Sunday, Boulder County Arts Alliance, along with the Lions Arts and Humanities Commission, is going to be holding their annual Arts at Riverbend, and it is from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. There is free admission. However, if you want to park on site at Lions Riverbends, there's a $5 parking fee. But it's going to have some food from Cured Gourmet and arts and crafts and cocktails from Spirit Hounds Distillery. So it should be it is a lovely, lovely event. So I encourage everybody to join. And then I wanted to bring something up. I've talked to Victoria about this. I believe it was last week, maybe within the last couple of weeks. There was an emergency up through Stone Canyon, then you hit the dirt road, which actually becomes, you start out Stone Canyon Drive, then it becomes Stone Canyon Road. And there was an emergency. A man called, and he was having a heart attack. And the fire department responded beautifully, got there quickly. Unfortunately, the emergency ambulance vehicle couldn't find the address because the signage from the road says Stone Canyon, I believe, Drive. There's nothing that indicates that it ends and becomes Stone Canyon Road. And then there's signage at Nolan, which is also a Stone Canyon something or other. So there are problems with the signage and the direction within that neighborhood. The person did pass away. I don't believe that because the ambulance was late would have made a difference or not, but nonetheless, I know that gets into Boulder County or Longmont. But I was just wondering if there's any way we can have still some kind of a sign saying Stone Canyon Road and Stone Canyon Drive that way, or something that doesn't necessarily have to go through an approval with Boulder County, perhaps. But it's no longer, I always thought the problem was an inconvenience from a mail perspective of getting somebody else's mail inappropriately or by mistake, but now I think it's a safety issue.
Trustee Carabas?
So that goes along with what I brought up a couple months ago when the ambulance was in front of your store and was looking for the Mayama. And I asked that, and we never got feedback from you.
I talked to them that same day, or that next day.
Because I guess before that, who was the ambulance service that, wouldn't that have been ours that came?
I don't know.
Or would that come from somewhere else to go up there?
They're almost all of them contracted.
Okay.
I'm having trouble recollecting exactly what the situation was, but I did follow up, and the person who called in was in a different location than where the incident was. And so the 911 picked up their phone location of the person calling in
Yep.
instead of going to where the person was.
That'll do it.
That's what it was. It did come back to me.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
PCDC, last meeting did have a brief update on the Summit and Eastern Corridor property development, which, they both seem to be going along. I guess Summit submitted an initial plan that's being revised, and that'll be coming back. But things are moving along on both of those at this point. There was a submission of a plan for a 3-story building in town, which could help with availability of housing, but also raises the question about the Lyons Fire District's ability to address the needs of a 3-story building in case of a fire, both in terms of fighting the fire and rescuing people that may be involved in that. That question may end up being involved in a lot more than just that application. And we talked about the artisan zoning tonight. We did have the URA discussions with the fire district and the library. The fire district took a pretty hard stance, this is my interpretation, took a fairly hard stance in presenting their position that they would retain 100% of the TIF because of increased demands for services as a result of housing and commercial properties that would be developed. They seem to almost be saying that the costs to them based on the development would be even more than they would be able to collect in straightforward taxes. There was a little bit of discussion about, well, is there anything the URA might be able to do for the fire department in terms of making things better for them and better able to service such things as 3-story buildings. But they didn't. There was actually minimal feedback about that from the fire department. The library discussions were very congenial, I thought. They also see that more housing will cause them to provide more services, but they won't get more taxes if they give 100% of the TIF. But they did want to talk about the possibilities of structuring an arrangement that may have different rates of sharing at different times during the 25 years, and depending on needs that they might have and needs and the need that the URA maybe have for accumulating funds. So overall, it does appear that that the URA negotiations need to be informed by the URA board, and so a suggested process for that might be to have 2 URA commissioners meet with staff to develop a sort of a straw model for what would it take to get to 8 million, 6 million, 4 million, and can it be done with the TIF estimates for town, the county and school board. And then how much would we have to have, if you will, from the library and the fire district in order to make it work? So I think that kind of basic work, and then the URA can give direction to negotiators to, to follow that course. So that's just a suggested method for moving that forward. We do need to move along with this because we started the 120 days in the beginning of July. And so we're moving along. And we don't want to get in a situation where we're being looked at as dragging our feet so we can get to mediation and that sort of thing. I think we want to be proactive and move forward. Just a real quick mention of Lions Volunteers. In recent weeks, diverted more than a ton of scrap metal and about somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 cubic yards of styrofoam that was picked up from residents' homes and taken to Charm.
Wow. I have a question. I have a question about that. Is that something that you all will be planning on continuing periodically? Because I had a situation where I suddenly was within all this foam, and I thought, oh, they've already done this, like it was not going to happen again. So I had to get rid of it a different way. And then you guys put out like a week later, you were coming, and I was like, dude. So is that going to be something that's somewhat ongoing?
Yeah,
Small service fee.
For my house.
We are 501c3, by the way.
Well, I think we will be doing that. In fact, one of the things that we still have to discuss this at our leadership meeting and confirm it, but I think we'll likely do something in September. And I was thinking it probably makes sense to do something like the first week of January, right after Christmas, after everybody has mountains of styrofoam.
Okay.
Oh, and one other thing, I just wanted to confirm that we're planning a workshop on lodging fee and STR-related discussions overall.
The planning commission is, or you want this?
I thought we were planning to have such a discussion at an upcoming workshop. And that was, I think.
I thought we had noise for September 2nd. Is it time sensitive to get to it?
Well, it's just that there are a few issues that are interrelated that I think we do want to talk about.
Is it budget related?
Well, we will have a budget implication for the, if we raise the fee.
Could it be part of the
Slash
budget discussion, I guess is what I'm getting at?
Well, no, I think it needs to be a little broader than that.
It's broader than budget, okay.
Yeah, it needs legal input about, like you said, whether we can raise the fee without a vote.
Yeah, and
Tax without a vote.
if there are, we went, and I know we're revisiting again, but it's another situation where, you don't want unanticipated consequences that are, particularly troublesome, especially if they can become precedents. And I think, I just think we need to talk about this.
Okay. Trustee Browning?
SSC met last Tuesday, I think it was, yeah. And, oh, I'm sorry. SSC met last Tuesday and spent a lot of the meeting really on two things. They have this kind of a committee that's working on updating the Sustainability Action Plan, which is a big undertaking because they're going to run it by, it's not just the SSC redrafting something and proposing it. They're going to run it by the UEB, the Ecology Board, other town commissions that it affects. So that's kind of a whole process that's ongoing. We spent a lot of the meeting also talking about the pay-as-you-throw program. The proposals haven't been received yet. Garrett, the sustainability coordinator, is kind of using the SFC as a sounding board of keeping them informed, obviously, of what's going on, because that idea originated, I think, from the SFC. And it's SFC, they're not just pushing it because they like the concept. They do like the concept, and over, they've made it clear to the board and talked among themselves that this is the biggest thing the town could do to try to reach its, increasing diversion goals. On the other hand, particularly after the update at the last meeting, which followed a meeting they had with the contractors that Ariel mentioned earlier. I think it's like almost 2 or 3 years now since the whole pay-as-you-throw concept was initially developed. The economics of the recycling industry, if you will, internationally and nationally have changed a lot in that time. And so China and India aren't accepting certain kinds of waste anymore. And those are gradually filtering back even to Boulder County recycling, which is one of the more efficient operations around anywhere that produces pretty clean products that in the past they're actually able to sell to people who could use it. Now, what they can get for it, and EcoCycle and their system has changed. The economics have changed, and when it changes for the processing center, it's going to change for not just Lyons, but for any other town that has a pay-as-you-throw or a good recycling program. So they're aware of all those changes, and they're not just blindly pushing a pay-as-you-throw program. They're going to wait to see what the proposals say when they're received. There were only 2 potential vendors that Ariel mentioned who came to that meeting. They may both submit proposals. They may get one proposal. You may get no proposals. But they're going to be involved in reviewing those, and they're well aware that what the overall picture looked like 3 years ago may not be what we have when we see these proposals. But they're actively monitoring it, and they're still trying to figure out a way to address the goals that were set out in the town sustainability plan. And it's a constantly changing picture, and they're working hard on it.
Are they working on any other proposals such as reduction in consumption kind of things like we talked about, trying to get people to stop using plastic straws, use paper straws or no straw, reducing plastic? I mean, I actually heard that they're literally now saying you're better off to put plastic bottles in the landfill than to recycle them. I mean, it's literally gotten so bad that they're like, it's costing us much more, and they're ending up there anyway. So
it's been talked about, and I've started working right after I got on the board at trying to do a simple ordinance on plastic straws available only upon request, which I think a lot of the local restaurants are doing voluntarily without even a resolution, so maybe it's moot at this point. But every time that comes up, either here or the SFC, people have other things they want to bring in. And their Colorado municipalities are limited at what they can do in regulating plastics, and it gets to be so broad that I don't know. It is discussed time to time, and there's no specific proposals working at this time.
Okay.
I kind of gave up the effort.
That's all right. Thanks.
If you haven't heard already, UEB is meeting Wednesday. Just so you know.
Are the Bears coming?
Yeah, the Bears might be there. You never know. And the mayor appointed Dan Kuntz to our board, and we lost Don Hauser. So, kind of went on a net zero right there. Something the UEB's talked about before. They're in the middle of still updating the code, chapter 13 of our municipal code with utilities. We're in the kind of the last parts of it, so they want to bring one big, they weren't going to piecemeal it, so they've been studying it. But we discussed today with Mr. Dean's fire tap issue, 13390 section C of our code, connection fees for properties outside of the town is the policy of the town to extend its corporate boundaries in a manner that is consistent with the town's utility service area. The town shall not provide new connections or increase in size of existing connections for water services to properties outside of the corporate limits of the town, unless such property is annexed into the town prior to the provision of water service. Nothing in this section shall affect or modify continued service to properties previously provided connection, blah, 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 blah. So we need to find out when this went into effect. So we may, with the fire thing, we may be in violation of our own ordinance, but there's a section we can modify it for ourselves if we want to. So, just so you all know. Got a question?
No.
Oh, okay.
Good question. Good
okay. Ecology board is meeting tomorrow, 6:30 over at the depot. Town staff kicked us out of here. I don't know why.
Actually, I kicked you out.
Oh, you did? Oh. You're off the hook, staff. It's the mayor.
It wasn't staff.
Okay.
It was me.
Get a room at the library.
Exactly.
It's open.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about
Well, someone all I got was a note that we just got sent over there. Who did that? You two? Oh, that was you two. Okay. 2 for 2 right there, Mayor. And then I brought this up a couple times before verbally when we kind of wanted to bring items to the agenda. It's never quite made it. Once was last fall, then early this spring for Section 11. Like to have discussion, make it a discussion, I guess, or open up the IGA. Section 11, IGA with Boulder County for Apple Valley sewer lines and get them on sewer lines instead of septic systems that we don't control. Since we fish, we have families that do a lot of fishing and swimming, and we have no idea what's floating in the water.
Is Boulder County requesting this?
No, I'm asking for us just to open it up with them about.
Boulder County wants that.
It's
Yeah,
so
I know
expensive,
that.
though.
I know
I
that.
just don't know if there's any money for it.
I know. We've talked about this before. I would like to bring
Yeah.
in Section 11 and have a discussion there,
Sure.
see if we want to do it, because Apple Valley wants a lot from us, and it's better for our water and our river that they're on a sewer line anyway. And it would have been nicer sooner since we had the roads open with water, but oh well. This is more long-term, 10, 15 years down the road. Because at some point, they're going to stop, I've been told, several people, they're going to stop issuing permits for septic systems in Apple Valley anyway. Yeah, but still, you got to repair,
I mean, at some point.
yeah, 15 years out, so.
25-year systems and you replace them.
Yeah. But you don't know when one's leaking, when one's failed.
When the flood happens.
Yeah. So that's it. And I think, yeah, I've got to bring to the UEB the Richard Dean request, and we'd mentioned then the resolution 2019-81 just about the fund issues with the water. So I'll take that Tuesday or Wednesday.
All right, well, just for the record, the reason you got booted from the chambers is because you moved your meeting and didn't tell anybody.
No, we didn't.
You moved from Wednesday to Tuesday.
Staff told
And
us we had to
so-
leave. We couldn't do it anymore on Wednesdays at 6:30 because of cleaning issues. That was several months ago. I mentioned that
Okay.
back in July.
Yeah, well,
So you
they
were told.
claimed that it was an unnoticed change in calendar.
It was no.
So anyway,
I'm just picking on poor
we
Victoria.
scheduled the Student Advisory Commission to be in here on Tuesdays. And no, I apologize for the conflict, but
That's right.
we thought the room was free because we didn't know you were meeting on Tuesdays. But the reason we're asking if you could use another location is because we wanted to use the dais for the students. We're trying to teach them how to run effective meetings as well as just, take on some issues. So,
I don't have a problem.
okay. Well, please don't throw me under the bus with your college report tomorrow night.
Will you be there tomorrow?
Well, the Student Advisory Commission will be in here tomorrow, and we are in, if the board doesn't have any objection, I'm proposing that they take on reviewing the recent change that municipalities can pass laws to regulate teen vaping. And so you can actually pass local ordinances now if you want to ban certain flavored vaping products or raise the age to purchase those products. So that what better group to get some input as to whether they think some of those things would work, but to have them do some research on that. So if there's no objection, I'm going to pass that issue on to them and see if they're interested in working on that. Then there's also Dr. Cog on Wednesday. The PRC met last Monday. They did vote to take a position that the town should take ownership of all of the buyout properties in our planning area from Boulder County. And so they will be sending their letter shortly. What's that?
Check.
Yeah. That's their point. Their position is that, when someone wants to give you free land, you take it and you figure it out later. And so they had a good discussion about the maintenance implications of that as well on the town. So they will be sending something over.
So
They
the
also-
ecology board, same thing.
Yep, I think they're in lockstep. The other thing they're going to take on is they really want to try to make the town more walkable and accessible to seniors, to all folks that need continuous sidewalks. So we're going to do a little assessment project where we divide up the town and we're all going to go out and take pictures of our sidewalks around town and look for some low-hanging fruit maybe where if it's a simple patching kind of thing that we might be able to do, or if it's even the homeowner's responsibility to fix what's in front of their home, to try to see how much of that we can do, and then align that with the plans that we already have around town to add more sidewalks.
Who's doing that?
This is Parks. So it's kind of along the lines of just encouraging people to walk town rather than drive. But I mean, I think it'll be a helpful project just to kind of get a sense for, are there some low-hanging projects that we could budget for in the CIP plan? Things that, you know, don't take an entire road reconstruction to fix. So that's what they're working on. That's all I have. Any other final comments before we make a motion to go into executive session?
Summary of action.
Oh, yes, sorry. Action items, do you have a list? 6 pages of.
Yeah. You need to find a time to request a meeting with CDOT, this is from our workshop, to share their plan and help with a community meeting. From the Board of Trustees meeting, we have some significant work to do on the financial updates. And I'm sure Jill will get that prepared for you, so we'll get those explanations. Present an update, let's see. Oh, start including our public hearing notices on our weekly e-book blasts with a link to the website for more detail until we figure out our posting strategies with the loss of the weekly newspaper. Have a little more research on employee versus independent contractor for the Board of Trustees. The board will have to decide how they would like, if and how they would like to address the issue brought up during audience business with Diane Johnson. And the forwarding the issue with tiny homes and as ADUs on R2As back to the Planning Commission. Send welcome letters to the 3 new appointees. Advertise the UEB opening, schedule a workshop for the new zoning, proposed craft maker zoning. You don't have enough workshop spaces with budget season.
Yeah.
Look to see if the 10 tiny home ordinance has a sunset clause. Staff confer with the UEB on recommendations regarding the fire taps outside of town limits. Continue to educate the public on bear-proof containers while we gather other community options. And bring forward a communications policy, draft communications policy regarding special events. Continue to work on the signage issue for our emergency vehicles. We've started that, but we need to do more. And then discuss the URA special district negotiations with the Laura board. And another workshop on lodging fees and SDR related discussions. That's
What? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just a question about advertising for the open seats on the, is that just part of ongoing effort of advertising all the?
All of it,
Okay,
sure.
thanks.
I just need to make sure we, that was just one of my follow-ups.
Thank you.
Trustee Farrell.
I was just going to say, you can take off the tiny homes to see if there's a sunset clause necessarily, because it sounds like since we're going to be anyway readdressing and having further discussion,
That group can look it up.
they can figure it out. So please just remove that from your agenda. Yeah.
Just a question from the workshop, and you don't have to necessarily respond, but I'd love to know what staff is going to do with the data that we received today. I mean, it was great information.
Been here to listen to that data, especially those that kind of spurred at this, but we can certainly host another neighborhood meeting because we're getting closer to potentially making some capital improvements in that neighborhood, so that'd be a good time to to maybe have Brian come back one more time and present this information to them directly. You know, tonight, I reviewed the information, but hearing it tonight, I'd like to go back to staff. The department heads haven't all seen that. So we'll probably talk about it at department head meeting and see if there's, I would think we need to talk with CDOT about the issues, and it sounds like we're gonna be talking with them in the near future anyway, so. About the speed study at McConnell, as well as bringing this up now and showing them the data, so they can see what we're facing. It does really match the CDOT data. The last time I saw their data in town was probably 2 summers ago, and it was only about 10,000 cars a day. So cars per day on the weekends is going up by a couple thousand. They should know that too, so. But then I don't know yet. You have some suggestions?
I think at a minimum, I think you're right. It's another meeting with the residents down there. You know, to some degree, I don't think that they're not going to be satisfied, but just hearing your streets have capacity for this many cars. I think their issue is, at times when you're in your home most is, you know, Saturday and Sunday, and then you've got more traffic than you normally see. And so I can understand why that would be irritating. But I just wondered if you had any plans. We don't have to get into a discussion, but.
We will meet with them because we've had the discussion about putting in curb and gutter and the parking automatically slowing. And if we put that stop sign in at 4th and Park, that then Google will take it off of their map as even an option to go through that area. And
Well, just tell them you put one up and don't put it up.
Well, that is happening now, right?
yeah, that's going to happen with this improvement. So I think they're going to see some major improvement. Once people start driving down that road and there's cars on both sides, they're going to go.
Yeah, I would just caution from sending the message that we don't think you have a problem. While I get that that's what the data says, and it's their perspective, so, okay. But yeah. I think
It's, it's similar to noise, and
it's all relative. Okay, all right, thanks. If anybody wants to take a break while we set up, you want to just go ahead and make the motion? I guess we got to vote first, and then you can take a break. Hang on, we got to go do the motion first. It doesn't really matter which one we do.
I think I can do both.
Oh, we can?
Just flow one into the
Sure.
other.
Sorry.
I move to go into executive session pursuant to CRS Section 246402-4B for the purpose of receiving legal advice from attorneys representing the town regarding the MOA with Lyons Properties and the town's legal complaint against Lyons Properties in Boulder County Court. I further move to continue the executive session pursuant to CRS Sections 246402-4E and 246402-4B for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators, and for legal advice from attorneys representing the town regarding the town's energy cost savings contract with Honeywell International Incorporated for the new wastewater treatment plant.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Okay, and we are in executive session, so it takes them a few minutes. So